9 a.m. we're going to get started. We are waiting on a few to make a quorum, but we can get some of the business out of the way. Representative Shedd, would you mind opening us in a prayer?
Let's pray together. Father, as we pray, we thank you for another day of life, and we thank you for your blessings that you blessed us all with. And we ask for your leadership and guidance as we do the public's work, and ask that you give us all safe travels home. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right, thank you. I'd like for the members to introduce themselves, starting with Senator Kelly, please.
Senator Keith Kelly, District 12.
Representative Carrie Underwood, District 3, that's northwest corner of Alabama.
Representative Matt Simpson, District 96, Alabama House of Representatives.
Randall Shedd, District 11, Alabama House of Representatives, Blount and Coleman County.
I'm Dixie Thomas with the Examiners of Public Accounts.
Zachary Gervin, LSA.
And Ms. Riddle, you're in the audience, so we're going to have you come up and speak in just a minute. I just want to make sure to introduce everybody. Pro Tem Pringle, would you like to introduce yourself?
You just did. Chris Pringle, District 101.
I don't know. I don't see it.
Shanika Thomas, Clerk.
Yeah, where's the Gavan sitting? Senator Sam Gavan, I'm going to introduce you, making his arrival. Thank you, sir.
Hey, I'd come a long way.
I know. Or did you want to say anything to the group?
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, I got a degree from there. War Eagle.
Roll Tide.
Okay, Ms. Riddle, I know that you wanted to make a few remarks before we got started for the benefit of the members. You have the floor.
Thank you and good morning. Kind of some of the stuff I said yesterday, but I know that there's board members here that weren't here yesterday, and I know there's also members that weren't here yesterday. What we did from last year's process to this year's is we took some of the things that y'all asked to be changed, and we did that in these reports, and you have noticed that, I'm sure. One of the things, and I forgot to say this yesterday, Representative Wilcox, it was very important to you what the board's websites looked like and how much information was out there. We really looked at that, and we reported that in the report because, as I agree also, this is for the public and they need to have access to all the information. So you will see that in the reports. Secondly, you'll notice that we separated out significant issues that were presented in questionnaires. Last year, y'all had concerns that that was not necessarily, those should be separated out. We did that this year, and you'll see that there's a separate section for significant issues in questionnaires. Also, one thing that I said yesterday that I want to reiterate, these are significant issues. This is a sunset process. Within those significant issues, there are some that rise to the level in a legal compliance examination, and all these executive directors and stuff know exactly what I'm talking about. They rise to the level of a finding. That is more of a legal finding. Significant issues do not have to be, this is legal, this is illegal. A significant issue is that our department sees that maybe the board isn't running as efficiently and as effectively as possible and maybe fulfilling their purpose, but there's not anything necessarily in the law that says you cannot do this. And an example of that is diminishing balances, end of year balances. We see if that keeps diminishing, that is an issue that we need to point out to you. Is that illegal? No, but it is something that you need to take note of. So I just wanted to say that as we move forward, I would like for any kind of things that y'all would like changed for the next year's process, y'all can tell us that, and then when we start next year's, we will do that. We want to make this process as user-friendly to you members as possible and get you all the information you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have an extra copy of pharmacy right there? Representative Simpson, not Stimson. We got you one right behind you. Right here.
She's got it. Dixie, she's got it.
Dixie, we found a copy up here. All righty. I want to welcome everybody here. We're going to try to move this as efficiently as possible. We have had several sign up to speak a little later on. I am limiting it to 3 minutes. It's not to be rude, but we can't take all day, but we do want to hear everything that you have to say. Now, if you are signed up to speak and somebody before you just got up and said everything you were going to say, it's perfectly fine to say you completely agree with everything and then sit back down so that we can keep the meeting moving. So I appreciate that you're here to make comments, but we just can't have everybody stand up saying the exact same thing. We've got a bunch of written comments that the members have read and are taken into consideration. So with that, I'd like to have the Board of Athletic Trainers, you're up, and Geologist, you're on deck. So can I have the Board of Athletic Trainers come up, introduce yourself, say who you are, introduce your board members, and give us your presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Chris King. I'm the board chair. I'd like to introduce some that are here and some that are not. My vice chair is Dr. Sierra Taylor here from Oak Mountain High School.
Stand up if they call your name, so because some people can't. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Miss Lydia Thurston is an athletic trainer and a physical therapist. She's a faculty member at Tufts University, so she is not here. She's teaching a class at this moment. Wes Richardson, an athletic trainer from Florence High School from Tuscumbia. Derek Bothwell.
Representing District 3, I'd like to say.
That's right.
Yeah, good job.
Good deal. Derek Bothwell is an athletic trainer at Huntington College. He's on the faculty there and from Montgomery, and he is teaching a class at this moment. Stephen Guthrie is an athletic trainer and physical therapist here. He's a home health care facilitator. He's elected from Hayden, Alabama. Kyle Southall is the ex officio member of our board. He's the president of the Alabama Athletic Trainers Association. He is presently in Paris right now with the Paralympics, so he is
nice.
taking care of some pretty important people there. Our physicians are appointed by the Board of Medical Examiners. It's Dr. Eric Law from Sports Medicine Family Practice in Troy, Alabama. Dr. Jody Ortega is a sports medicine physician practice from Birmingham, and Dr. Robert Agee is sports medicine physician practice, also appointed from Birmingham. All of the physicians had to stay in their offices today, but so that's who we are. So, I would like to clear something up from yesterday. Just I think yesterday there was a statement that that the athletic trainers are on the board are appointed by ALATA or the Alabama Athletic Trainers Association. That is not exact right. All of the athletic trainers on our board are elected. ALATA just happens to run the elections as far as that goes as a third party. Yes, sir.
Those elections, are those statewide elections?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is that why, and I wasn't here for the meeting yesterday, but I do have some concerns that I'm very happy that we have a member, Dr. Law from Troy, Alabama, but there's a whole other section of the state that's South Alabama that a lot of people ignore. And when you have a list of Kimberly, Birmingham, Hayden, Birmingham, Tuscumbia, Wetumpka, Hoover, Birmingham, I don't want these boards to get geographic centric where we can find as many people from Birmingham and surrounding areas as possible. There's a whole other end of the state that you guys need to start going into.
We do have thank you for that. We do have a board member that'll be starting in January as an athletic trainer from Auburn University. And so we are trying to stretch that. We encourage that. It's a nomination process and then elected by persons.
Well, we may need to change that because I have a problem with a single specific region being so dominant over a board. This is a board for the entire state. If you wanted to be the athletic trainers of Jefferson County, you have a great board. But for the purpose of being a state board, if we need to change how you guys are organized to make sure that there can be representation from, I'm from Baldwin County, there's people from Mobile, there's people from the other end of the state that are not recognized on your board, and that's a concern for me.
Thank you, sir. Take that. We'll take that back, discuss it.
Okay, now we're going to, thank you for coming up. We're going to have the examiner give the report, but now we've got some members, so keep your stuff up there. We'll be calling you back up. I'm going to have, now that we're all, just you can keep your stuff there, but sit down. She's going to give the report. But first, now that we got everybody coming, pardon me. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? Now that we got everybody here.
Representative Wilcox,
Here.
Senator Barfoot, Representative Pringle, Senator Coleman Madison, Senator Gavan,
Here.
Senator Gudger, Senator Kelly,
Here.
Representative Rafferty, Representative Shedd,
Here.
Representative Simpson, Senator Stewart, Representative Underwood.
I'm here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Now, I was in error. She's not going to be reading the report again. That was all yesterday. So come back up to the podium. Do we have any members that have any questions of this board? Athletic trainers.
Madam Chairman,
You're recognized.
so, and I'm on, the bill that was passed last year or 2 years ago, 2 sessions ago, that provided for an appropriation or a line item, I guess, in the budget for, I think Senator Chastain's bill, I think it was up to maybe $1 million a year. I think over the past 2 sessions, we've appropriated about $200,000 for athletic trainers in rural areas of the state, 1A, 2A, 3A school systems. Have there been any applications for that?
That will actually go through for this school year. All right, it goes into effect now. So the way the process will be done is for those athletic trainers that will be working in those rural schools, they will start this school year. And then in the spring, and actually February 1 to April 1 is when we have our application procedure. So they basically will get to be able to apply for that after the year. And so then they'll apply through the process. So I will say this about that. First of all, thanks for anyone who voted for that. I've personally seen athletic trainers move from Mississippi to Alabama in preparation to get that money. I've seen athletic trainers from larger schools move to a smaller school in apprehension to get that money. And that's so it's working already. And it has been approved for another year. It is only for, I believe it's actually $300,000, which will get us a few of those schools, okay? Now, to be frank, honest with you, 1A and 2A and 3A is you don't have as many athletic trainers there as you do in the larger schools for several reasons, but mainly it's because they're just smaller. Most employers of athletic trainers are through hospital systems or physical therapy clinics. Probably about 80% of them that work in high schools clearly are paid in that manner. So the concept behind this bill that we ran through was to get them to get a little more salary so that they don't leave those settings. And we've seen that because athletic trainers, just in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of, because we've changed our Practice Act, we do not work just on athletes. There's several places, Toyota, Amazon, Hyundai here locally. There's several athletic trainers that work in those facilities. They're paid quite well. So they're relieving the athletic training, the traditional setting. Also, the fact that we moved officially 3 years ago to a master's entry level, that's created a shrinkage of athletic trainers coming out of school because their salaries have not risen very far, and kids are not stupid, so they're not going into it as much. So we're having nationwide, we've got a almost 40% decrease in graduation rates for athletic trainers. So it was a massive shortage. So putting in that money has been a nice carrot to keep people where they're at and also to draw people in. We're just hoping that in the future we can fund it a little bit larger to where we can increase it into 4A and 5A and then move on up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Simpson, you're recognized.
I think you hit a major point that I do have some concerns with. If you're requiring a master's degree for someone coming out to be involved in athletic training, what's the pay for the entry-level for the entry-level athletic trainer?
Okay, so right now you're pretty much looking at $48,000 to $52,000.
So you're out requiring a master's degree to come out to $48,000 to $52,000, and you're wondering why we can come up with all these legislative bills and spend government dollars to come through and make sure that we give you guys grants to pay for the gap. But if you're requiring a master's degree to be an athletic trainer and you have a shortage and you're wondering why kids don't want to go to school to 4 to 6 years to come out to make $48,000, That's a position that I don't think you want the legislature involved in, because that's just bad government. You're shrinking the appearance that you've given. And I'm just going to tell you, my problem with what I have, you've shrunk the nature of where your board is making decisions from. You're all making decisions from Birmingham. Now you've shrunk the people that qualify. If you have a 22, 23-year-old kid with a master's going into college that says, I really want to do athletic training, I really enjoy this sport, I really enjoy being a benefit to the community, but I can't afford the student loans or what I have to pay to go to school to get a master's degree to come out to make maybe $48,000 a year on an entry level, and you're creating this burden and you're creating these hurdles to make this master's, and then you wonder, why do we have a shortfall in rural areas? I think it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, don't you?
Oh, well, let me be clear. We didn't pick that, okay? That's our Board of Certification for the whole country, okay? So as far as...
who did?
Sir?
Who did? Who picked that?
The Board of Certification of Athletic Training. That's a national board. That's not our decision.
Okay, so can the Alabama legislature change it, or do we need to, does that be, I mean, we can change some laws for Alabama if we need to change laws in Alabama, if we need to make sure that y'all aren't following a national board, because if we're hurting because some other states can offer more, we may need to address that.
Okay, well, let me be very clear with that, because I do governmental affairs here and with our profession, our National Athletic Training Association. I sit on the committee for the whole country with that. So this is a bad situation, okay? We didn't make this rule, all right? I'm a bachelor's athletic trainer because I'm an old guy, okay? They added that a few years ago, about 10 years ago is when they first started talking about it, and they added it and it went into effect 3 years ago. It is, and it's been a bad or not the best decision I would have liked. Now, I'm talking personally, not from a board position. But it has created this problem. It's been a major factor in creating the shortage. So as far as changing that, I don't know how that happens from a state level. I agree that states can make their, but our law in Alabama requires us to be board certified as an athletic trainer. And in order to do that nationally, you have to have your certification completed through the Board of Certification. I do not disagree with your frustration. Trust me, I promise you on that. It has been a tough change professionally. And Madam Chair, I'm sorry to go off, but this is a problem where if we are having to give more money from from the taxpayer dollars, if we're having to give more money for grants to spend taxpayer dollars to comply with some national board's recommendation that you think is a bad idea, that I think is a bad idea, and surely the taxpayer is going to think it's a bad idea because that's where their money has to go. The results are not getting there. I would like to see some type of change or some type of recommendation from you guys on what we need to do to recruit more people, what we need to do to get more people involved in your board, and that's not just the government should just write a check.
All right, thank you for your comments. Any other questions for this board? And look, thank you for your board members for coming, and thank you for being here today. We appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am.
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see you call for a question.
I'm sorry. I was busy. I just, and I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You have 3 of your board members must be black.
Correct.
So in other words, 33% of your board is African American.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know the percentage of blacks that are athletic trainers? I'll tell you if you don't know the answer. I don't ask questions unless I have the answer.
Yes, sir.
It's less than 1%.
That is correct.
Less than 1% of your membership is African American, and yet 33% of your board is black by statute.
Yes, sir.
Y'all are completely ignoring the Hispanics and the Asians, which are about similar in percentage.
That is exactly why when we redid our Practice Act almost 3 years ago now, we changed that to minority.
Okay, so you can include them?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you.
Representative Underwood, you're recognized. Oh, she just told me. All right. Any more questions of the committee? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Professional geologist, you're up. Chiropractic examiners, you're on deck. Please introduce your board and have them stand when each of their names are announced. Please, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. My name is Troy Perry. I'm the chair for the licensure board for the state of Alabama for professional geologists. We do have some members here. We don't have all our members here. Our vice chair is Mr. Russell Gerbel. He is not here today. He represents the geotech industry. Dr. David King is not here today. He represents the academia and faculty. Yes, he teaches at Auburn War Eagle. Mr. Richard Katz is here. He is the petroleum industry representative. We have Miss Leslie Noble is here, and she is the independent consultant representative. We've also got Dr. Scott Brandy. He's here. He represents business. We also have Mr. Chris Bryant from Decatur, Alabama, and he represents the mining industry, but he is not here today. So we have 3 members that are not here. So do I have a question?
You're going to notice a theme.
Yeah, I'm
Birmingham, Leeds, Auburn, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Decatur. Like, I don't know what I have to do to let you guys boards know that there's a whole other region throughout the state. I'm frustrated not just with you, but I'm frustrated that this is the licensed and professional geologist of the entire state of Alabama.
Right.
And we come here every year, we come to these meetings, and every year it's one specific location that is dominant because it's easier to get people to come to meetings. And you have a whole region of the state that is just completely left out.
Yes, sir.
And I really would like to see some effort of some form of geographic diversity.
Yes, sir. We have had several members all over the state in the past boards. This board, it just happened to fall that there are some more Birmingham members than not.
You'd be surprised the number of boards that come up here and say it just happens to be that way that people from Birmingham.
You know, we did. We had Dr. Allison was the faculty representative from South Alabama, just, from your district or your area down there. So
he lived in Mississippi, didn't he?
No, I think he's still in South Alabama.
I thought he moved to Mississippi and he was still on the board. I think, if I'm not mistaken, when we were here 4 years ago, we had this issue come up and he had moved to Mississippi.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, but we've talked to him. Actually, we're reaching out to several different areas. We've been to Tuscaloosa, trying to get more board members to get more response, try to get education to be able to get more interest with young people with the profession. The profession has declined to some degree, so we're trying to get more people interested. We've also taken the board to University of Alabama. For those of you, Roll Tide, but we have had that come up where we've actually been down there, had meetings. Mr. Katz and I have actually done presentations down there to classes. And we're actually going to reach out. Our next meeting, we're trying to work out with David Allison down in South Alabama. So we're working on that right now, trying to make sure that we're taking our boards on the road, trying to get more interest in the profession of geology. I got any more questions? I'm glad to talk about that. We've also done some things about finances with increasing our fees. So that'll help that situation look. And if you look on page 13 of the report, you will see a line graph that's showing our expenditures and our revenue coming in close. They're right in line right now, but we've also seen the fees that started in 2024 will be coming forward, and we will be collecting more fees from our members. Now, here from the people we represent, the geologists and the people of Alabama, but the geologists will be paying more fees. The fees overall are less than what other states are paying right now for their licensure fees. Also, I want to make sure that you understand that we are actually going to try to reach out for younger people too. We just had an opportunity. I talked to the CEO of Central Alabama Girl Scouts, and we're trying to get more diversity. I know that question is going to be coming up probably from Mr. Pringle, but we want to make sure that we get more diversity, more women, more people of color. And so we've reached out to the Girl Scouts. They just opened up a facility in Vestavia, Alabama. I'm sorry it's in Vestavia. I wish it was in South Alabama, but
there's nothing to be apologized for. I understand that we are a minority in the population. I understand Birmingham is a great asset. I understand what we're doing in the great areas in Huntsville.
Right.
But this purpose is for us to be able to make sure that we voice some concerns we have with boards who just completely overlook us.
I totally understand that, and I'd appreciate that very much. But again, we want to make sure that reaching out to the CEO that we're actually reaching out and doing presentations to young women in a STEM program, or STEAM program as they call it now, science, technology, mathematics, that sort of thing, to kind of get them interested in the profession at a younger age. And the only way we're going to survive as a board is more diversity. We realize that. So we're going to try to get there, and we're working towards that now.
Okay, Representative Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator, didn't mean to give you a promotion.
I appreciate it. I just had a start of your Christmas card list. No, I kind of echo the comments of my colleague, Representative Simpson, as far as the geographical challenge of the makeup of the board. However, I do realize or suspect, based on your comments, that sounds like you may have difficulty finding people to fill positions on the board. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes, to a degree. Our people are very, very busy right now. We have a lot of representatives from other states that come in as consultants. They pay fees as well. We have a lot of people that work very hard, and there are not that many geologists because things change. There's more pressure on natural resources. So you have to have geologists to be able to estimate and determine if those resources are feasible, to be able to work things out. For example, groundwater for populations, for drinking water. Mm-hmm. As you go in Gulf Coast, one of the things we talked about on the Gulf Coast, drilling, and we don't want to drill into an aquifer that's a good, viable aquifer, but then you have introduction of seawater moving into that area. If you don't know what you're doing, that could happen. That's why we have geologists look at that data and make sure that data is correct, and they do the investigation. So I want to say we reach out to people. If they're interested in the board, we get them on the board if they qualify. They have to qualify first. I think we have a younger group coming in. A lot of our folks here, the people here, you see gray hairs. There's nothing wrong with that. I've got that too. But we're seeing an aging workforce. And after COVID hit, we did have a decline in the membership. I don't know what that was, other than maybe people went to something else. I just don't know. Or we might have lost some geologists.
Well, your comment about the gray hairs is deeply offensive to myself and Representative Underwood, who are hair follically challenged.
Well, I have to include Dr. Brandy right back there too.
We would gladly take a hair of any color, but
well, I was talking facial, but
okay. Well, you're all right.
It's all good.
All right. So another question, just on my ignorance of the profession. So, do you have a bulk of your licensees that are centered in, say, for example, the coast, Birmingham, or whatever, just because those hubs are where most people work out of, or is it reasonably spread throughout the state? I understand some areas would not be much of a demand for that.
There's rural areas that a lot of Alabama covers, of course, and you don't see as many consultants or as many people with that background working in those areas. You may see them to some degree, or they travel to that area. A lot of the consultants are in the Birmingham area. There are quite a few up in the Huntsville and Decatur area. I think one of our members is from Decatur. Coastal Plain, I know there are quite a few that do coastal plain work. We do have some other people. It's hard I don't think I've ever seen a chart showing, and that might be something we need to work on, a chart showing location that might give us a better handle of how many geologists are in a particular area. And that way we can kind of pull from that and take that into consideration as a board. We're glad to do that.
And it just would be interesting to see that, since it is such a specialization field. I appreciate your time, appreciate you answering the questions, and I greatly appreciate your board members taking time to come out. At least for me on the Sunset Committee, when board members take time out to come down, I realize it's a long drive for a lot of you, but it's appreciated. It shows that you care about your profession. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I have a question. I'm on page 4, your pass-fail rate. There's been a sharp decline in the ability of the people wanting to be geologists passing the practice of geology test. It's gone from 56%, so this must be a hard test, but now we're down to 11% that took the test and was able to pass it. So, and you have, of course, less people taking it. So do you have any comments? Who trains the geologist to take the test?
Universities. So what happens is there are 3 universities with geology programs in the state of Alabama. We do not have any historically black universities that teach geology. Most kids are, and this is something maybe the legislature can do, most kids are exposed to geology till about the 7th or 8th grade in school, and then they move on, and then they decide what kind of science they're going to get. You still get biology or chemistry, but you don't necessarily see an emphasis on earth sciences. Earth sciences are taught in 3 universities, and we have seen a decline, but you've seen universities actually dumb down the profession a little bit, so we have less people because they are meeting what their requirements are for finance. They are trying to get, for example, at Auburn University, I went down and talked to Dr. Lee, and we reached out to the advisory committee to try to speak to them about, can we maintain this level of professionalism to pass this test that you're required to take. And what happened is that Dr. Lee said, well, we also have had to combine geography with geology. So they're combining things to save money. And I don't want to say they're dumbing it down. It is a situation where universities have certain criteria and they follow that criteria, and we see less people being able to take the test because they're not taking the courses that would allow them to pass.
List me it's Auburn, and what are the universities that are teaching?
That would be University of Alabama and South Alabama.
Okay, because I have a practice of passing this information on to our education policy and our education funding, because this means a lot to me. If somebody paid 4 years of college and couldn't pass a professional exam, then we've taken their tuition and not served them well.
Thank you. You're right.
So the examiners, for some reason, either y'all did not have this information on who was doing it. Normally, this is included in a part that I have requested. I do request that y'all try to go back and give us some more information on the universities.
Yeah. Just to give you a little more background, the State of Alabama, the Licensure Board, is a member of the Association of State Boards of Geology. There are 38 states right now. They basically take this test. That's how you can determine if the university, or excuse me, if the profession is maintained at a high level. Now, we have reciprocity. We have reciprocity with Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. If you pass the ASBOG, we consider that a long way towards licensure, but we also have reciprocity with other states, which allow our geologists to go over there and their geologists to come over here. So that's a real helpful thing, because geology does not necessarily have state boundaries. Just like watersheds, just like groundwater, you have to be able to go from one area to another to look at resources that are out there. So we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to give our geologists the opportunity to even practice in other states. But doing that, you also allow geologists from other states to come here and practice. But as long as they pass the ASBOG, that is a long way towards getting licensure. And there are 38 states with ASBOG right now.
Okay, we got Simpson and Underwood. And then, is it Pringle that wants to talk? All right, Simpson and Underwood. You're up, Simpson.
I'm glad I've generated this interest.
We're interested in everybody. Every board's going to see this today.
Okay, good.
This is what we do.
Gotcha.
The prosecutor in me comes out a little bit. I do have a concern, and according to the statute, Alabama Code Section 3441-4, the terms of the members are for 3-year staggered terms, and no member shall serve more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms without interruption in service of at least 3 years. Right. I bring that to you because the statute says that, and I'm looking at every single member of the 7 members of your board are serving past their expiration date. Your board chair term appointment was in 2018, term expired in 2021. We are 3 years past his expiration. If you're looking at according to your letter of February the 29th of 2024, if you look at on the first appendix 3, so right after page 34, it's not numbered page 35, but I'm going to assume that's page 35 because it's right after 34.
Okay.
According to the letter that you sent to the Examiner of Public Accountants on February of 29th from Keith Warren, your executive director, Troy Perry, board chair from Birmingham, Alabama, term appointment October 2018, expired September 2021, continues to serve beyond board expiration. Russell Gabriel, vice chair, appointed 2020, term expired 2023, continues to serve beyond expiration. Treasurer, appointed 2020, term expired 2022, continues to serve beyond expiration. Every single member that you have on your board of directors, there is a parentheses underneath in that letter that says continues to serve beyond their expiration. So we either need to get them back reappointed on their terms in their term system, or we need to get new people on board, because what is the point of having a law if you guys aren't going to follow it?
Yes, sir. And again, it's 2 3-year terms that you can serve consecutively. Am I correct in that?
That's what it says. You have to be stepped away.
Because my term, from my understanding, runs out this October. This will be my last.
Well, tell me.
That's 6 years. So I've got done 1 3-year term and then another 3-year term. So
It doesn't say that you were appointed to a second term. It just says your term expired in September of 2021. Right. It does not indicate that you were reappointed in September of 2021 to a 4-year term.
I'm not too sure, because when we've had board members serve, we've always had 3 years and then additional 3. Now that may be.
I don't understand about what you mean by I'm not too sure. This is y'all's letter.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is that traditionally, with my knowledge of the board, when I was put on in 2018, I was told that you will be given a 3-year term, and then at the discretion of the governor, then you will continue to serve 3 years until you're reappointed by the governor. So the governor appoints these boards. We notify the agent? Yeah, it's three terms. But we notify the office of the governor, from my understanding, and then the governor makes the decision on how that goes.
Okay, so y'all's position is that the governor has not appointed anybody from these 2021 expirations, and y'all have just been sitting there. Have you reached out to the Sunset Board or any members of the Senate's appointment committee to ask them to say, hey, can you guys help us with the appointment process?
Yeah, we have sent letters in the past.
Would you send me those letters, please? I'd appreciate that.
I'll be glad to. Mr. Warren, can we get that done? Thank you.
All righty, Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is more along of advisory. I wanted to go back to page 11. Your beginning January of 24, your fees and renewals went from 150 to 200, and you said that's a reasonable amount compared to states around us, correct?
Correct.
Is it lower or just kind of right in the middle?
It's a little lower.
Okay.
It's right in that range, but it's a little bit lower. I think Mississippi. I'm trying off the top of my head.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's around
That's not the point of my conversation.
Okay.
I want to make sure we're not over. But
let me say this about the fee increase. When we sent a survey out to the licensees throughout the state, we got responses of positive through everybody but one. One person did not agree with the fee increase. Everybody else that responded agreed with the fee increase.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the fee increase. I did have some questions about going concern when I look at the unobligated cash balance from 4 years ago being $891, and today it has improved up to $19,000. But my advice to you on this added fee, which if I remember right, that's going to be around $25,000 more per year rolling into your treasury per year.
Yes, sir.
I would advise you to get that unobligated cash balance up some. Now, just so you'll know, this is the exact opposite of everything I've recommended for every board prior to you, because they have a lot have cash reserves that are too large, in my opinion. Yours is too low. And so I would advise you to build the reserves up some, but to also initiate, like I see on here that y'all have done away with in-state and out-of-state travel reimbursements. When we get members on the board, that covers people from the extremes of the north and the south, as we've discussed with Representative Simpson just now. Well, they've got a lot of miles to travel, and it's going to be hard to encourage people to be members of the board when they can at least get the mileage to go back and forth.
Right.
So I would advise you to reinstitute that practice of reimbursing for those, and to encourage membership, and to encourage you to get the reserve up to where it's a little more reasonable. That 891 from 4 years ago had me concerned about the continued existence of your board financially.
Right.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Hopefully we made those changes and we're in
Yes, sir.
better shape now than what we were.
Yeah, the increase of the fee was not a concern of mine.
I wouldn't mind getting that mileage either, or getting reimbursed
Right.
to some degree, but, we love this board. We feel like it's necessary for the state of Alabama and to protect the people of Alabama.
Yeah, I get that. I just want to encourage more members from other places, like we mentioned a little while ago. I think that would encourage more people to want to be a board member.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood.
All right. Any final questions of the membership? All right. Thank you and your board for being here. We appreciate the
so
frank
much.
and open discussion.
I appreciate the committee. Thank you so much.
Board of Chiropractic Examiners, you're up. Hearing instrument dealers, you're on deck. Please come up, chiropractic examiners, introduce your board. Board members need to stand to be recognized when their name is called.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Brian Wells, President of the Board of Examiners. All of our members are here today except for one. His dad is currently in the hospital. He had a stroke. It's Dr. Ken Randolph. I'll introduce the board members. We have Dr. Renee Bowen from District 4, Dr. Matt Youngblood from District 1, Dr. Lori McMillan from District 2, Dr. Kim Ogletree, who is our African American member, Dr. Greg Millar from District 5, and Dr. Brad Russell from District 6, and our consumer member is Mr. John Segrist.
We appreciate all their attendance. You may have been part of the work session. Do you have any comments or anything you'd like to present to our committee on behalf of the report that we've been given?
I do not.
Do we have any members? Representative Stimson.
I'm just on a
you're
roll
up.
today. I want to point something out that I appreciate that your board has done. Your board has taken it region by region and required an election by within the region. So that's why you have a mandatory member from District 1, from District 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't want to have us start forcing the hands of other boards to do exactly what your board is doing, to say you have to have someone from every geographic region. But I want to commend you, because I've been so hard already this morning, on boards that I think are doing it right to get the geographical diversity that serves our state well.
Thank you.
Representative Shedd, you're up.
I'm just curious about how the election process for your board takes place. What's the process for?
So the process, we have to have practiced for 5 years minimum. Basically,
I mean, how is the election selected? How is the board selected?
We're free to put our name in the hat to run if we meet the criteria to qualify.
Who votes on that?
The members in that district.
Gotcha.
The African American member is statewide.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Pro Tem, you're recognized.
I'm not seeing it in your demographic information, but I've got two questions. How many minority chiropractors are there in the state of Alabama?
Oh, I don't know the percentage. 35%? 35%? 35 doctors? Oh, 35 of our roughly 900 licensees.
35 of your 900 licenses are African American?
I believe so.
I'm doing some quick math here. So that's not even a percentage of your membership.
Not much, no, sir.
Because your board is 12%. It just, We're talking proportional representation.
Sure.
And I'm not opposed. I just, when you start setting aside, you get disproportional representation. Do you have, how many other minorities do you have? Indians?
I don't have the exact number. Just do.
Well, whatever, the Asians, I'm sorry. Got to be politically correct.
They're very few. Definitely less than the 35.
And the other question I have, you're done by congressional districts?
Yes.
Which congressional plan are y'all going by?
The current one, I believe.
So you've rearranged.
We've rearranged, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
To comply.
Yes. So
What are you
the
gonna
members
do?
currently serving, if there's some overlap, they will remain in their position until that term expires, and then it'll follow into the new district.
Do y'all have any plans if we lose a congressional district in the next reapportionment?
We do. We'll leave that member in that seat, and then when they term out, we will.
So you'll
we'll
just drop
lose
down
that.
to?
Yes, we'd drop down a number.
You're just going to give?
Unless you have a better recommendation.
No, I'm just asking questions.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Rafferty, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the more important question when we're talking about racial representation is what is your board doing to try to get more African Americans and minority folks and citizens of Alabama to be and engage in your profession?
We have just encouraged them to run. If they participate in any of our state association meetings, we encourage people to run. We love, new members and new ideas, and if they're willing to do it, this isn't a big high-paying job, so a lot of people are not that interested in it. So, but I think we're doing better than we've ever done as far as our diversification. So,
have you done any outreach to our historically black colleges and universities?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Might be something to look into.
Sure.
All righty, I'm on page 8. There was a significant issue, 2024-002, that you're charging a fee for a specific amount is not set by law or for which there's no administrative rule setting the specific amount to be charged. The board's fee schedule reflects it currently collects $850 annually from licensees enrolled in the wellness program. Licensees are typically enrolled for 2 to 5 years. Since the law does not provide a specific amount to charge, the current fee amount should be set by administrative rule. So has your board addressed this concern, and are y'all coming up with an administrative rule to address this?
We did address it. The fee that's being charged is only charged as a consent. So these are wellness members that have some sort of issue, drugs, alcohol, sex, and so it is part of their consent order that they sign to pay this fee. So while it's a fee, we consider it just a cost recovery. It's part of their monitoring process.
All right, I think you do have to set the administrative rule outlining that fee. Does that fee vary, or is that your set fee?
It's set. But,
Okay.
we can, line item a fee, but it's really, fee is not the correct word for it. It's not a fee. It's not assigned across the board. It's just part of their agreement as they're entering into this wellness program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does any of the members have any further questions? Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
As a form of bragging, on page 11, your number of chiropractors has risen from 807 to 954. So, I'd like to see that number rising. I will note on page 16, if I look at just the license fees, they and some of this is probably timing based on when a deposit is made in the bank, but it's $338,000 in 2019 and $333,000 in 2022, though I do notice there's some upward ticks in the 2 years in between. But, based on the rise of licensee holders, the licensing fees hasn't risen to the level I thought they would have. And again, that could be timing based on the last day of the month versus the first day of the next month at year end or something like that. But I sort of expected those fees to increase. But the fees didn't increase, but the revenue should with
Sure.
added practitioners. I did have some concerns about, again, I'm still on page 16, when we look at deficiency of receipts over disbursements. In every year from 2019 to 2022, we are overspending 27, 28, 26, and 17,000 per year, and your unobligated cash balance has dropped from 634,000 to 473,000, and eventually the pattern will need to be studied and rectified. I'm not encouraging high holding of retained earnings. I'm not encouraging that. Just want to make sure you're aware that your pattern of overspending has continued over a 4-year time frame. Eventually, we need to.
We've addressed
rectify
that. We just implemented a $25 fee increase. We had some confusion, our bill versus the dial bill, which one we had to go by, and the Department of Public Accounts gave us kind of a clarification, so we increased by 25. We plan to do another $25 increase next year, so that should account for these deficiencies and balances back out.
And our fees compared to other states were reasonable in that number?
Absolutely. Louisiana is very similar to us. They have the same number of licensees, and their fees are basically right in line with ours. Matter of fact, they just implemented an increase to $350, which is what we would have preferred to have done. The dial bill would have allowed us to go to $360, which we were going to do, which would have been a $60 increase. However, our rule or our code did not allow us that much, so that's where we asked for the clarification. 25 was all we could do. We'll do another 25 next year, so that should put us pretty much on target.
That'll get you 350, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other members? All right, thank you to you and to your board members for your attendance today. We appreciate your cooperation and the report.
Thank you.
Hearing instrument dealers, you're up. Home builders, you're on deck. Hearing instrument dealers, please make sure to introduce your board and have them stand if able when their name is called. We've had a request that you also announce where they're from when their name is called, please.
Okay. My name is Stephen Michael. I'm the chair of the board.
Pull the mic closer to your mouth and speak louder, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Stephen Michael. I'm actually the chair of the board. I am from Foley, Alabama. Our executive secretary, Sandra Bice. Todd Wright, he's in Gadsden. Amy Farmer, Enterprise, Dothan. And Chris Hicks from Daphne. And Don Luttrell from Florence. And we have our consumer advocate from Clanton, Mr. Myers.
I take it Representative Simpson does not have anything to comment on the representation. Thank you.
No, I will say I appreciate you guys showing. You do have Clanton, Gadsden, Mutzel Shoals. See, here's the issue we've got. You're from Fairhope and you're from Foley. We've got Fairhope and Foley and Dothan, so we've got 3 in the South. And that just throws everybody off in their minds. They can't comprehend that there's an equal number of people from the South. Right. So, no, I appreciate your board having that, and thank you for the geographic diversity.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any comments that you'd like to make about the report that we've been given?
We are addressing the issues in the report. We are actively looking for an ENT, which was one of the, for our board. Our previous ENT did pass away, and we are still in the process of trying to find an ENT to serve on the board. Our previous audiologist did resign, I believe it was last year. Her term had expired, so we actually just are in the process of receiving a nomination for an audiologist to serve on the board from the association. And
All righty, we have a couple of questions that are chomping at the bit, so why don't we move on to that? Representative Pringle, excuse me, Speaker Pro Tem, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have a question about 38% of your board meetings were canceled due to a lack of quorum. Are y'all going to address that?
yes, I think when we're looking at the time period, for that time period, it was right at 2020, and it was during the COVID.
Okay.
We did have just one virtual meeting, which was approved for us to be able to have, and that I believe was in 2021. So, and it was because of COVID that all our meetings had to be rescheduled or canceled.
Okay. So y'all are addressing it?
Yes, we
Okay.
are.
Thank you.
Chairman's privilege, I'm going to ask a question. On your pass-fail rate, I recognize that there's some room for improvement, and you've listed all of the schools that teach it, but I would like that further broken down by what schools graduates are actually able to pass the test and which ones have more of a challenge in that area.
So currently, the tests are ILE-based, and it is through the IHS, which is the International Hearing Society, and they administer all the tests, and it is typically computer-based, and that's how they usually would qualify for hearing, to be able to practice as a hearing, either hearing aid specialist or hearing dispenser.
All right, well, I'd like for y'all to work with these groups and find out, if you could dig down and in the future come back with a little bit more information.
Yes, we do have a requirement that prior to them taking the test that they have to do a distance learning program prior to actually getting into the field.
Even if you have to add a questionnaire at the start of the test to say where they were educated, that might be helpful. You might want to work with those testing centers to capture that information.
Yes.
And then on your internet presence, my other hot button, this is where the public goes for information. Your website does not have the board's minutes, and it is the governor and this legislature's desire to have more things open and everything transparent to our citizens. So what efforts are y'all taking as a board to make sure that you get all the required information and your website updated?
So we are actively, our executive secretary, Sandy, could actually speak to that. She is actually actively speaking to OIC right now to update our website to get it more in compliance with what the requirements are. And I would...
Does she want to jump on up?
Yes, please.
Please, ma'am.
Good morning. I am actively working with the Office of Information Technology, hopefully to get a brand new website built. Our website was built by a licensee that recently passed away. It's older. I'm not sure if it's not powered as well as it should be. So that is top priority. I'm working on that right now to hopefully get that in the works.
Thank you very much. Any other members have a question of this board? Representative Simpson, you're recognized. But I'd like it to be Representative and not Prosecutor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to commend, and the whole purpose of this was to commend our chair for the purpose. She passed a bill that passed through the legislature for the House and the Senate that removed the sales tax from the state sales tax from hearing aids. And is there anything that you guys as a board can do to notify the general public? The next step in that would be to notify the cities and the counties that they could remove their tax as well. Are y'all working on that or doing anything to notify the public from that?
Yes, we are. We certainly are. I've actually, I myself have contacted our Chamber of Commerce and the president of the chamber is actively and speaking to the mayor and the city council as we speak. I believe in the state of Alabama right now, the only city is the city of Madison that is actually in the process of finalizing the exemption on the sales tax on hearing aids. But it's going to be a two-phase process because you have to, besides the city, you also have to approach the county commission to see if they will also have that exemption implemented. But yes, we are trying to make everyone aware of the fact that there are things that they can do in terms of trying to get the city and the county involved in trying to get the exemption implemented.
All righty, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? All righty, we appreciate y'all coming. Thank you so much.
We did have one piece that we'd like to ask you about, Ms. Wilcox. I think when I spoke to you, it was about the OTC hearing devices, and we don't have anything in our bylaws or rules to actually distinguish the difference between prescription and non-prescription. And IHS has helped 13 states to have it implemented into this, and I guess we would be looking for a sponsor to be able to get that done in the state of Alabama as well.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about how great it was that we removed the state sales tax from
it is
hearing
great.
aids this
Yes.
past year.
It is great, and I believe Todd Wright had a lot.
Shameless self-promotion of HB 51.
No, it's great, yes. And as I said, there's a lot more work to be done with it in terms of the city and county, but it's great that it was done, yes.
And I would hope that you've got advocates and that you're prepared to go to these cities and counties and have them replicate what the state has done, because this is an undue burden that no surrounding state charges sales tax on hearing aids. Only 3 states in the United States charge this type of tax. When I found out about it, I was just shocked and ashamed that we were taxing hearing aid instruments. So I think that it doesn't need to stop at the state level. We need to go and make sure that our citizens that have a hearing loss are treated just as fairly as the other states. And I'll have to do, since workforce development was a big deal this past year, and it's always a big deal in this state because we're recruiting. One of the top 2 reasons why people leave the workforce is hearing loss. So if we want to retain our workforce, our experienced workforce, we're going to need to make sure that incentives like not taxing their hearing aids and doing things to keep safety in the workplace so that you can hear properly and communicate and have safety guidelines. So I will end my promotion of what I think we need to do about hearing aid instruments. And any other questions or anything else, sir?
Just the implementation on our rules and bylaws to actually get the distinction between the OTCs and prescription hearing aids in context of knowing what is, and we don't have that in ours right now.
Okay, we'll research that further, and I'll get with you after the meeting.
Okay.
And I know that y'all will go on to your daily activities, but we can meet later on. Just give me a call and we can set it up with the clerk on how to meet and get more information about what you need.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All righty. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Home builders, you're up. Interior design, you're on deck. And home builders, I remind you to please introduce your members, have them state where they're from, and stand if able when their name is called.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Chip Carden. I'm the Executive Director of the Home Builders Licensure Board. I've been there for 26 years, hoping to be there a couple more. I'd like to introduce my board members. I have Bill Deloney. He is from Dothan. Bill, if you'd stand up. I have Ken Kirchler. He's from Auburn. I have Don Sperlin, he is from Albertville. I have Michael Tolles, he is from Montgomery. I have Kenneth Chandler, he is from Huntsville. I have Peggy Turner, she's our consumer member, she's from Birmingham. I have Randy Cunningham, who is from Huntsville, he is our building official member. I have Roddy Sample, he's a remodeler from Birmingham. And then I have Seth Gowan, who is our general counsel, is here today.
Is that a 100%?
All of them but one. One is out of state.
Okay. All right. I thought I was about to give you a little prize.
We tried hard, but we couldn't quite make it.
We do appreciate y'all all being here. Thank you. Senator Gavan, you have the first question of the day.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the world changed in 2000, from 2008 to 2012. And we don't have as many home builders as individual home builders as we used to have, and they're not as active, and many of them have had to resort to remodeling. It's just because the way development came up and so many different things. I noticed that one of the issues is that 13 of the 18 or 72% of the ones that were questioned about this are objecting to the amount of the continuing education they have to have. And just from my experience with them, obviously they're dealing with the same thing all the time, but I can see a reason that they would need to be updated for changes in the law, changes in the code, and some of that's going to be very localized because, Randy's, hammering on them in Huntsville and nobody is anywhere. I'm kidding, Randy. My question is should we perhaps look at relaxing that and spreading it out a little bit over a longer period of time where they have the opportunities to get those updates, and I understand that there's going to be new materials and stuff like that, maybe that they need to know about, but it just does seem that it's not, the law is constantly changing. I mean, lawyers have to constantly go through CLE because, this is where we just sit around and decide on a whim that we're going to change the law. But it seems to me that the home building industry would be more static and maybe not require as much continuing education. I'd like your thoughts on that, please.
My thoughts on that is 8 years ago when we were before this committee, the committee said, how come you guys aren't doing continuing education? We're on our third or fourth year of doing continuing education. It has been a very time consuming to try to get that program up and running. Licensees are required to do 6 hours a year, which are 4 are easy to get, and 2 of them have to be Alabama specific, whether through contracts or, and we've got a pretty good selection of classes for those to come by. We also have an exemption, age exemption, which is anybody over 60 does not have to do continuing ed.
That's why I hadn't heard from most of my builders then.
And it's when we put that exemption in, over 3,000 of our licensees of the 9,700 filled out an age exempt form. So our licensure database is getting older by the minute. That means they're at least 60 or over. There could be some, I can go back to the board and talk to them about, do we need to stretch those 6 hours out? But right now we're kind of in the beginning stages of the continuing ed program, and, nobody likes the guy holding the stick. Nobody likes to do continuing education, but it's necessary in many cases. Yes, sir.
Pro Tem Pringle, you're recognized.
As one of those 3,000 exempt elder home builders, listen, I think y'all are doing a good job. I really do. And I see the need for continuing education because, I see what goes on out there. And we do have a problem with people aging out of the business. I mean, I look at my crews and I'm like, I'm not seeing a whole lot of young guys out there working anymore. But I would like to see you expand the opportunities because I get the notices and I'd like to take some of the classes. I think they'd be interesting. But they're not. I'm up here. I can't make the classes. I would love to see, like the realtors. I mean, realtors. I'm a realtor also. You can take continuing ed all the time. So I'm gonna ask y'all to continue what you're doing. It's good, but try and provide more classes for us at different varied times.
I agree. We're approving new classes and new providers all the time. I think I approved 2 or 3 of them this past week. So they're coming in, trickling in.
Yeah.
This Home Builders Association probably has the largest amount of classes, and most of the classes are available online, so you can take them anytime you want to.
Yeah. Just keep it up. Thank you.
Senator Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to commend you on the continuing education. When I attend our local home builders meetings, they are actually very favorable comments on it. I know I've been there when several people have come and spoke on it. I would suggest listening to this feedback, and I know you're growing it and it's somewhat in its semi-infancy, but expanding it, the classes maybe, and then kind of like I think continue to develop it more, because I think you're gonna have to have that to recruit that age demographic that you don't currently have. Those that are more seasoned, have been doing it their entire life. Those that are less seasoned are learning differently, and you've got a lot of those that younger age group that they're learning in a whole different manufactured way through the CE, through the online, those types of things. So I want to commend you first on what you're doing, but the second, I want to challenge you to try to expand that a little bit.
We've the board has gone to great lengths to try to make it as broad as possible and prove as many as come to the table. One of the things that we have, that if there's a class out there that you want to take, you can get certain information on the provider and the class syllabus, and you can have that class approved, and we'll take it if it's got good content and it's germane to the home building industry.
And you also have classes specifically for roofing as well, correct?
I think there are some in there. I would like to see more in the roofing department, especially from some of the shingle manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And I do know that there is some of the fortified programs have got a couple of classes on there, that especially for the South Alabama and the high wind areas, to help progress that program along.
I think that's really, I think that part's really important, because especially the southern part of the state, getting those insurance credits that they need to build those. So thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Representative Shedd, you're recognized.
I just want to thank you for every time that I've had a constituent in my district that needed some little extra help from you. You came across beyond the call of duty, and I don't always get that with a lot of agencies. We sometimes have to go around and around and around, but you've just always gone beyond the call of duty, and I thank you.
I appreciate that. I have people in my office that fuss at me because I give out my cell number at meetings. And so if anybody wants my cell number, I'll be glad to give it to you. You just contact me or the board, and I'll be Johnny on spot, hopefully.
Well, sometimes, and a lot of times it's their fault, but sometimes it's holding up them be able to do business in a certain location, and it's real important, and as far as their business. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to get to some of the meat that I had asked about yesterday.
Yes,
I'm going to end the love fest. I am interested in your transfers to your homeowner recovery.
Yes, ma'am.
I think go ahead. I'm not going to ask you the question because I think you have already sent me some of the ideas, and so please expand upon how we're going to increase this line item and get the money out to the people that need it, that have had an unfortunate incident or experience with a builder.
We have a $20,000 cap per transaction and a aggregate cap per licensee. The 20,000 cap has to be changed via regs. We've recently had some legislation changes. We've got a big batch of regs that are coming to account for that. And one of those regs is that we're going to try to raise significantly the amount of that payout. So instead of being able to pay out $60,000 for a licensee or 3 people at $20,000 a clip, we're going to go to somewhere between 75 and 90 per licensee, so we can pay 3 claims at $25,000 or $30,000. The board has yet to arrive at a figure, but that's on the plate for us to increase that payout.
Thank you, because like I said, I do appreciate that y'all have this fund, and as costs go up, and I did appreciate the procedures, which I'll say these have to be adjudicated. This is not a committee deciding. This is something that the courts go. So I appreciate your procedure. I appreciate that you have the fund, but I'd like to see more of it be able to get into the hands of our consumers that have been wronged by any.
Especially with the construction costs, the way they have skyrocketed, it's time for us to raise those amounts that we pay out. And over the 26 years that I've been there, we've paid out over $6 million. So we continue to put more money in there and try to pay them out.
Thank you. And then we had some questions about your software that you've upgraded. That was a large line item. Can you kind of give us the Reader's Digest condensed version of that?
The Reader's Digest condensed version on that is we were approaching the end of life on one version of software, and we would either have to spend money on it to upgrade it and then go to the new version, which is we're trying to do an agency transformation that's set out in our strategic plan to get more services for licensees, for consumers, for building departments that use our site significantly. Those biggest costs have been spent. The most of that is done. We're in the process, and we held off on converting to the new one because we're right in the middle of renewal season, and I don't want any problems. So therefore, you should see a pretty good transfer the next go round because that's where our monies basically came from. We did not exceed any of our spending authority, and we're hoping that we get back to putting some more money into that recovery fund.
Thank you, sir. Does any members have any further questions? All right. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your extraordinary board attendance at coming to these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Interior design, you're up. Pharmacy, you're on deck. I'm just taking a poll of the committee members. Anybody want a health break after this board, or do y'all want to power through? All right. Okay. You've got the floor, ma'am. Please introduce your members, have them stand if able with their name is called, and say what area of our state they represent, please.
Okay. I'm Ann Nyman. I'm the chairman of the board. Our executive director, unfortunately, is having some serious health problems today and was unable to attend. But we do have our board members here. Abby Owen from the Northern District. Sammy Warnoff from the Central District, Anne-Marie Janotis from the Western District, and Bonnie Pate from the Southern District. Tanya Miller is here. She's our newest board member. She's our educator representative from Sanford. And Lori Boone is our consumer member, and she is moving her child into university today and could not be here.
Well, thank you. And if y'all notice in the back, they have each individual city that tells you where each of those districts are from. So thank y'all for being here. That's good participation, and we can understand moving your child in.
That's right. Priority. It's a big job.
It is. It is. It's a significant moment in a family. All right. Do we have any any committee members that have any questions? Senator Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the significant issues is that you didn't comply with the Open Meetings Act, and I want to know what you've done to correct that and why that was in place.
Our executive director would be better able to answer that question. From what I understand, it was maybe a misunderstanding of the posting requirements to the state website where those meetings are posted. And he thought he was posting correctly, and he has since communicated with, with the people who interface with that to find out what the issues were, if any, and as far as I know, it's been corrected. But he understood that he was, sending notification properly.
And how long has the director been with you?
A pretty good time, and that's the first time that we've been cited for that. So I'm not sure if the process changed at some point, or
No, ma'am.
we're the board members on this board. We're all volunteers. We all have full-time jobs, and we rely on our executive director to try and keep up with these changes.
Yes, ma'am. I understand that. When you've got a director that's been there quite some time and you have something like this come up, that is a big deal to me. So not a lot's changed in that regard. So, whatever the case may be.
I think it's been, I'm pretty sure it's been resolved. He spoke to, the people that needed to be contacted about that, and I think we've been posting the meeting notices just like we always have, and have never heard of an issue with it. So, and I know he sends emails. We have registrants, and he sends emails of meetings out to all the registrants for every meeting, plus posts it on, I believe it's the Secretary of State's website, has the general posting for all the board meetings.
Well, another issue, I kind of get on my soapbox a little bit. I won't go to Representative Simpson on this, but just like where the board of directors are from is an important issue. When you have vacancies on your board, notifying the Secretary of State, the failure in that seems like just an easy thing to do, just a clerical thing to do when you've got one come out, you know.
Well, now he says that notifications were given.
Well, I beg the pardon. The examiner's
I don't
office says
know.
otherwise, and he's going to lose that battle with this committee.
Yeah, and I think he's looked into that to see what the issue is and has tried to rectify it. So
Yes, ma'am. My recommendation is that you and your board get with him on these two issues and make absolutely certain that they're resolved. Ultimately you're responsible, and we know that you have other jobs, and I applaud you for that. So I don't mean to grill you too much, but there's an accountability issue here.
yeah, that's fine.
That's our job.
We need to know about it too. So if the process is not working for whatever reason, we need to understand why and get it corrected, and we will absolutely get it corrected.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. On your examinations and your pass-fail rate, where are interior designers educated? And how are they not, you got a less than 50% chance on some of these of passing the professional exam.
It's a tough exam.
Who's your education? Who's your education facilities?
We have several universities in the state of Alabama who have accredited programs. Auburn University, Samford, Alabama, Virginia College. Who are the? University of North Alabama. So there's 4 or 5 accredited programs in the state of Alabama, and they are all, they have a national accrediting organization that visits these universities on a regular basis and examines their program and makes sure they're up to qualifications, and the students who go through those programs qualify to take the national exam, which is what we use for determining registration eligibility. And that exam is very comprehensive, and like a lot of professional exams, it's a tough exam. We deal with codes, design.
I can appreciate that it's a tough exam, but I want to know which institutions of further learning are doing the best job of preparing. If they're taking the tuition money, I want to know if they got a better than a 50% chance of passing the test. Because if a parent or a student has taken out student loans and they have no opportunity to earn a living in that field, then we have done a disservice, and they have a debt for which they cannot repay.
Yes,
So I'd
well,
like for y'all
I
to
can
drill down and find out who's doing a good job and who's doing a poor job that needs that information passed on to the education, both our policy committee and our funding committee, so that we might point out those shortcomings.
Okay. All right. We can drill it. I think the NCIDQ exam may keep those records. We'll have to look and see.
Please request those and have those sent to our clerk so that we can pass that on to the members and pass it on to our education committees.
Okay. We'll do that.
Thank you very much. Any other further questions? Wait a minute, Chairman, my Vice Chair, Co-Chair. No.
Thank
I'm
you.
the Chair.
All right. So what's the difference between an interior decorator and designer? I noticed that was on the questionnaire that the public didn't know that, and I'm guilty of that. What is the difference?
As far as for the registration and exam purposes, the registered interior designers are typically more, the basic education is focused more on life safety, code requirements. You were talking about hearing aids and being a cause of loss of work. Those are the kind of things we deal with in our environments. We're trained for accessibility, where there's hearing, sight impairment, mobility impairments. All of those things are building code based, and we are trained in those. A lot of decorators, just by nature of experience, are familiar with a lot of these, depending on the types of projects they engage in. But a lot of decorators only deal with surface adornment, paint, finishes, maybe basic plan layouts, but they are not necessarily familiar with and keep up to speed with building codes and the changes in the laws and changes in material science, lighting, it gets into lighting. We deal with life safety systems, fire alarms, suppression. I'm doing projects on suppression systems now.
Much more than just aesthetics then.
Oh, yes, very much more. Aesthetics is probably the least.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pro Tem Pringle, you're recognized.
As a builder, trust me, I know the difference.
Yeah.
There's a world of difference when you work in the field every day with them.
Thank you.
And I appreciate y'all's professionalism and your training. It shows up, what we do. I would, however, ask that y'all please give me a demographic breakdown of your membership. 247 people. I'd just like to know what your demographic, your breakdown is. All right.
I don't know if we even have records of that.
It's only 247 people.
Well, I don't think we keep track of who, of the demographics as far as that goes. It's, by far women. There are more men coming into the interior design profession where, typically in the past they went through the architectural programs. There are more minorities coming into the programs.
I'd like to see a breakdown.
Okay.
I recommend you send an email and get him a response. Please.
Okay.
Any other questions from the members? Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for your board participation and coming to the meeting.
Thank you.
Pharmacy, you're up. Dental examiners, you're on deck, but I think you got a little while. So I'd like the Board of Pharmacy to come up, introduce your members, state where they're from, have them stand if able. I can't hear you. Yes, you're recognized.
While they're coming up, I thought I'd give y'all some context to what people were saying. I don't know if y'all paid attention. They were talking about the Dow bill. And I'm sitting back here thinking some of y'all might not know what that is. So Senator Dow is the Dow bill. And back when the state was in the hole back in 13, 14, 15, we were coming up with ideas to help entities. This was one of the ones that I wrote. So it allows a board to take their fee and increase it without coming to the legislature to the CPI for at least 10 years. So I wanted y'all to know that, one, because they keep talking about the dial bill, chiropractors talked about that, but also that there is a mechanism in some instances with these boards for them to raise their fees without having to come back to you. In their instance, it didn't work because of some legal reasons of a different bill passed afterwards, but y'all just know that that's a tool out there for some of these boards struggling. Maybe they don't have to come back to you. But I also was sitting there thinking, that was a decade ago. They might not even know that that tool's there. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you very much. We're still on schedule for 10:30. I'd like the chairman of the Board of Pharmacy to come up, introduce your members, and have them stand available.
Is it okay if I do that as exec instead of chairman, or would you like?
I need you to pull that mic closer to your mouth and talk louder.
I'm sorry. I'm not usually told to talk louder. Thank you. Is it okay if I, as exec, introduce who's here for us, even though I'm not the chairman?
Yes.
Okay. I have with me today Dr. Christy Garman, who is our current president, Dr. Tommy Cobb, who is our current treasurer, Ms. Stacy Giles, who is a member, and Mr. Anthony Brooklier, current member. And then also...
You got to announce where they're from. That's the only part you're leaving out.
I'm sorry. Dr. Garman is from Spanish Fort. Dr. Cobb is from Dadeville. Ms. Giles is from Auburn. And Mr. Brooklier is from Mount Olive. And then I also have 2 prior board members who came because they were board members during the audit, if I might be indulged to introduce them as well. We have Mr. Rob Colburn from Tuscaloosa and Dr. Brenda Denson from Birmingham.
Great, thank you.
Would it be okay if I just had a brief, some information about the board before I go into some explanations of some of the significant issues?
It is.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Donna Yateman. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Alabama Board of Pharmacy. I'd like to thank the examiners for their very thorough and comprehensive review of the Board of Pharmacy. As a regulatory agency, we understand and appreciate the oversight that the examiners provide, as it is akin to the inspections that we provide for pharmacies. We sincerely appreciate the work and see the issues raised as opportunities to continue to improve the operations at the board. The Board of Pharmacy is statutorily charged with safeguarding the health and welfare of Alabama citizens through various means. The board regulates approximately 30,000 licensees and permits. Our board is unique in that we not only regulate individual practitioners and pharmacies, but we regulate any entity that's involved in the entire supply chain of prescription medications. The board takes seriously its responsibility to ensure the safety of Alabama patients. We are confident that every citizen in Alabama can rely on this board, as every action this board takes, every rule they write or amend, and every disciplinary action is driven by the board's mandate to protect the citizens of Alabama. When COVID hit the Alabama healthcare system with the volume of patients and the severity of illness, the board expanded the role of pharmacists and technicians to include COVID vaccinations, COVID testing, antibody infusions, and remote work, which remain in place today. While the country was shutting down, healthcare providers and the Board of Pharmacy ramped up and saved lives. The board worked with the Alabama Hospital Association to develop an emergency contingency plan, including converting hotels into inpatient facilities if that was needed. The board gave temporary practitioner privileges to out-of-state pharmacists. Practitioners were constantly seeking guidance during this time, and the board met this challenge by immediately posting information to the board website with best practice updates. Hospitals were running out of supplies and medications, including sedatives that were needed for ventilated patients. The board worked with hospitals in the state to share inventory and utilize board investigators if necessary to move medication across the state. The board pressed wholesalers to ship additional medications to Alabama institutions. The board staff worked with the DEA to expedite opening new pharmacies to treat COVID and increase the inventory of needed medications. In the event that Alabama hospitals ran out of medications, the board worked with the DEA to create an emergency contingency plan to obtain the ingredients needed to make medications at local pharmacies. These are just a few of the actions taken by the Board of Pharmacy to address drug shortages, access to care, and maintain safety during COVID. In addition, during this time, the board continued its regular day-to-day functions, including licensing and investigating complaints and violations of the Pharmacy Practice Act. The board also worked with local insurers, including Blue Cross and Blue Shield and UAB's Viva Health, to combat fraud. These investigations revealed serious criminal activities and fraudulent schemes, necessitating rigorous oversight and enforcement. In 2020, a Birmingham pharmacy was investigated for fake prescriptions. The pharmacy was found to be a front for the Russian mob, which had stolen over $9 million through fraudulent billing in less than a month. The board's investigation led to the FBI identifying numerous other states having the same activity. In 2022, a Mississippi-owned chain of Alabama pharmacies was investigated for selling foreign-made diabetic test strips in counterfeit packaging. This case, involving multiple agencies, including U.S. attorneys, resulted in the owner pleading guilty to healthcare fraud, the owner's incarceration, a $7.1 million forfeiture, including gold bars and loose diamonds found at his facility, and over $16 million in restitution. Board compliance staff thoroughly reviews all applications. Entities with deficiencies are evaluated by the 5-member board, and sometimes permits are not granted. Often, these denied entities are later sanctioned by the FDA or their home state for failing to protect public health, supporting the board's decision to deny the application. Thanks to the board's diligent work, these entities never legally shipped medications into Alabama and therefore protected the citizens of Alabama. The board routinely reviews rules to remove antiquated or burdensome regulations while safeguarding the health and welfare of Alabama citizens by protecting patients and increasing access to care. The board works closely with the Board of Medical Examiners to increase collaborative practice agreements in an effort to allow further activity of pharmacists in rural areas and pharmacy deserts, healthcare deserts. The board staff regularly speaks to schools and other audiences regarding drug use and misuse and the practice of pharmacy. Board investigators hold drug take-back days to mitigate the opportunity for misuse. And over the last 2 years, the board has provided countless man-hours to the Attorney General's legal team and was instrumental in the opioid litigation, which secured $728 million in settlements from healthcare and drug companies in the state of Alabama. I'd like to take a moment to address a few of the significant issues that were discussed yesterday, and then, of course, available for any questions you may have.
And can we pick up the pace a little bit, because we've got a bunch of people.
Yes, ma'am. For the first significant issue that the auditors addressed, as far as how the financial statement changed in fiscal year 2023, that was done in order to provide a better representation of where the monies were coming from. However, we understand that the examiner's point, and we've already instructed our accountant that that will be changed so that those administrative monies that are coming in are a separate line item so that it's more clear. As to deferral agreements, while absolutely what the examiner said is accurate, that different individuals or entities will be given an opportunity to have a consent order at a certain amount and potentially a deferral order at a double amount. These are only done in situations where there is not patient harm a consideration. In addition to that, this is part of a settlement discussion. So it's not mandated. No one is required to take the deferral agreement, nor are they required to take what's offered. It is simply a starting point for our attorney to use to maintain consistency in dealing with settlement negotiations. As to the board's interpretation of per violation, the board has always identified that as any activity or offense or instance or lack thereof. But again, we understand the examiner's perspective, and on the issue I just spoke of and the one I'm about to speak of, this is something that we have been doing alongside the Attorney General's office for the last 2 years, but we have reached out to them and said the examiners have concerns, and we are looking at ways to identify how to maybe amend the process to ensure that we're still doing what we're required to do to safeguard the citizens of Alabama, but recognizing the examiner's concerns. Which brings me to statements and charges on applicants. As I mentioned earlier, we get applicants that we have concerns about whether or not they should be shipping or should be practicing in the state of Alabama. We think it's vitally important that every Alabamian be very confident that the services and medications they're going to receive from their pharmacy, they can rely upon that. And so we are very diligent in vetting those applications when they come in. Another item addressed were our minutes. In 2016, it was recommended to us to go from full transcript to abbreviated. We were audited in 2019, didn't recognize that we were wrong. Nothing to say about the examiners, just to say that had we known it then, we'd have fixed it. But we have addressed this with our court reporter, and we've also put 2 levels to go back and check the minutes to make sure that they are appropriate going forward before they're presented to the board for approval. I will skip to the questionnaires just because I want to be conscious of your time and give time for questions. Obviously, the board's not happy that there are individuals that are not happy with the board. However, I think it's important to note that for pharmacists, we had 38, I think, or 32 reply, and we licensed over 10,500 pharmacists. So that was less than 0.2%. So while we understand that not everyone is happy with the board, we think the overwhelming majority are, and we hear that from when we're at conferences or when we're talking at schools and we're interacting with other pharmacists. They're very pleased and proud of the work that we're doing. The one last thing that I will mention is we did have some prior findings, and I will say that the last sunset report, I had been at the board for a short period of time, thought I had implemented processes that were appropriate to catch any issues. Clearly, that is not the case. We've already gone back and reviewed those operations to add, depending on the situation, a second or third level to verify that those are being done appropriately instead of only having one person in charge of that process.
Okay, thank you. Members, do y'all want to hear from our list of speakers before you ask your questions, or would you like your questions now? Okay, we'd like to hear from the speakers. So I'd like to remind all the speakers that you have 3 minutes. We have a timer. If someone just before you says exactly what you want to say, please don't get up and repeat them. Just get up and say you're in complete agreement. So we have Joseph Krebs up first. Christy Williams, you're on deck.
Madam Chair, as we discussed yesterday, I'm going to yield some of my time to Mr. Munkus. So would you like for him to go first so we know how much time I need to yield? Because I think I could probably talk for weeks about this.
Okay, you've used 1 minute. Come on up here. Yield your time to the next person. You're on deck. I'd like for you to be near the podium, so that way we don't have to wait on the transport time. Can you state your name and where you're from, please, sir?
Good morning, Jamie Munkus from Birmingham. I'm an attorney for over 21 years. Admittedly, I have very little experience with the Alabama Pharmacy Board. In fact, I've only been involved in one case before the board in 2022. This is not what I do, to be clear. I handle personal injury and wrongful death cases all over the Southeast. But in the spring of 2022, I came to represent a man by the name of Billy East. Billy had been a pharmacist since 1976 in the state of Alabama. So with no experience in this area, how did I come to represent Mr. East? I got a call from a professional colleague of mine, Mr. Krebs. He said something had gone horribly wrong. Would I be willing to listen? I said, sure, always willing to listen. He brought me his file, and that's the first time I'd seen the name Billy East. I came to understand that Mr. East had been charged by the Pharmacy Board for violating an obscure federal statute having to do with getting the DEA to grant a waiver in order for him to dispense certain medications. I said, let's look at the federal statute. He pulled it up. It was no more than 3 sentences, very simple. I quickly looked at it. I realized immediately there was no way this man could be charged with violating this statute The statute did not apply to Mr. East. Had nothing to do with Mr. East at all. Had to do with the pharmacy. The pharmacy wasn't charged, only Mr. East. I said, so what's the problem? This statute doesn't apply to him. They can't charge him with this. He looked at me and he said, the problem is they not only charged him with this, he's already been convicted. They've stripped his license. He is no longer licensed to practice pharmacy. I was stunned. I said, there has to be some miscommunication here. No lawyer, no person who reads English could look at this statute and charge this man with violating it. I said, let me get involved. There's just been a miscommunication. I thought this would be pretty simple, but I was in for a bigger surprise. Not only did the board not see the error in their charges, they dug in their heels even further. They became bullies. They refused to acknowledge the federal statute. I was shocked. I sat in the conference room at the Alabama Pharmacy Board before Executive Director Donnie Yateman, who just spoke, and the two board lawyers. I said, this is a terrible mistake. This statute doesn't even apply to this man. They weren't interested in talking about the statute. I said, he's got to get his license back. Their reaction, almost all in unison, was to laugh. They all laughed. Ms. Yateman said in particular, he will never get his license back. After several motions, got involved, filed motions, they continued the retrial, the rehearing. I soon found out they were never interested in applying the law. They were never interested in the truth at all. They were all about grudges. I also found out that unlike any other governmental body, there were no checks and balances. There were no separation of powers. The hearing officer, the judge, the executive director, the prosecutor, and the two board attorneys, the deputy prosecutors, they were all the same. There was no separation of powers at all, and they were very selective in what they told the board members. They didn't want me to talk to the board at all, in fact. It came to a head when right before the retrial, they knew who our key witnesses were going to be in the retrial. You know what they did? They went out 3 days before that trial and charged those witnesses under the Pharmacy Board Act so that those witnesses couldn't appear and testify in the trial. But for the Attorney General stepping in, taking over this case, intervening, and dismissing all charges, Ms. Yateman would be correct. Mr. East would still not have his license back. But I'm pleased to tell you that Mr. East is practicing pharmacy where he belongs today, in Gardendale, Alabama. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? You've got 26 seconds, Mr. Krebs, left on the...
I don't know the proper procedure here, but if I can make a motion or something, I mean, obviously they took quite a bit of time. I would appreciate it if I could have a little bit of time.
You yielded your time. I'll give you 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Oh.
30 seconds.
You're not winning your case here. Moving.
I've been representing people before the Pharmacy Board for probably 20 years. The Pharmacy Board's funds are hidden from public view. In 2023, licensing fees collected by this agency hit $4.4 million, with nearly $4 million of that spent on administrative salaries and benefits alone. These board members are paid. They are making a fortune being on this board. It's wrong. They pocketed a combined $325,000 in salary and per diem payments, and travel expenses were more than $210,000. They extort $1 million annually from these licensees through unlawful fines and junk fees. Late fees surged almost 1,500% from 2013 to 2022. The former board attorney was removed by the AG's office for misconduct, yet the current attorney, with very little experience and who apparently has some prior relationship with Yateman, who was also involved in the misconduct, was handed a $450,000 contract. The current executive secretary went from her powerful position of board member 1 month to raking in nearly $250,000 a year as secretary the very next month, And now we learn when this report comes out
Thank you. Your time is up.
that she's making
Does any members have any questions
$275,000.
of Mr. Krebs?
Can I have 10 seconds?
No, sir. We were very clear with you yesterday. We will have questions of them in a minute. We've got a bunch of people to go to. Christy Williams, you're up. Ms. Atkinson, you're on deck. 3 minutes.
My name is Christy Williams, and I am a consumer of this agency whose spouse has severe diabetes. I am deeply concerned with the mismanagement, lack of transparency, and blatant law violations within these findings. This agency only exists to protect the public, and when members of the public like myself are unable to view accurate disciplinary reports and transparent meeting minutes, it raises great concern surrounding the reason why this board isn't mandated to appoint a consumer member. Looking through the board's responses to these significant findings, I'm reminded of my previous involvement with Sunset. It makes me wonder how a board would see fit to compensate an executive secretary over $275,000 just to abuse their authority, mislead the agency, and violate statute written by lawmakers. This agency uses state funds to excessively pay lobbyists to convince all of you that their actions are justified, while members of the public are unaware of these issues. As a consumer, I assure you that I personally have zero trust in this administration or their ability to protect me over their greed and interests. It's interesting they operate under the guise of consumer protection, yet they have no plan for consumer education. Frankly, these deferral agreements are absolutely not in the best interest of the public. It's nothing more than extortion while hiding the infraction from consumer review. As a licensee myself of another agency, I fully believe that disciplinary actions determine or deter consumer selection. As this agency disagrees with the findings in the report, I'd like to remind lawmakers that the licensees who've received these excessive fines, they most likely also disagreed with these findings. But this executive secretary ignored the statute in order to pad the board fund and keep the salaries intact. I am convinced that this administration will not only continue to violate whatever new law you write, but they will also continue to ignore the reason why they exist, and that's to protect me. This board is another example of why Alabama needs reform and rectification of these licensing agencies. The abuse of authority and misuse of funds cannot be simply justified just because they disagree with the findings. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions? Next up is Ms. Atkinson. Mr. Maddox, you're on deck.
Good morning. Members of the committee, my name is Deidre Atkinson, and I am...
Speak louder and pull the mic up to your mouth. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Deidre Atkinson. I am from Birmingham, and I am a paralegal and current third-year law student. For 17 years, I worked for the previous board counsel, and for those 17 years, he and I worked successfully with no less than 5 executive secretaries for the pharmacy board. Of course, you know, there were personality conflicts like there are in every work environment, but at the end of the day, the board's mission of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Alabama won out over anything else. But it seems like the current administrator controls the board office out of fear. I've been told by several licensees that they don't feel comfortable reaching out to the board for guidance. They don't feel comfortable reaching out to the board, you know, for anything, quite frankly, because they are afraid of retaliation in the form of surprise inspections, you know, to see if they're doing what they called to get guidance about, which, of course, doesn't make me feel comfortable going to my pharmacist, knowing that they are afraid of who's supposed to be their ally. Former board counsel that I used to work for expressed to me many times that he did not agree with the new policies that were implemented by current board administrator, requiring a statement of charges be issued for everyone in order to be consistent. So in October of 2022, I had to part ways with former board counsel because, in my opinion, he had become so bogged down in the corruption orchestrated by the current board administrator that he compromised his ethics. He compromised his morals in a way that I had never seen in order to keep the board as his client. This not only cost me my job, it cost me my friend of 17 years. It cost me my mentor. He was getting older, getting close to retirement age. None of his kids went to law school. 4 kids, none of his kids went to law school. I went to law school so that I could carry on his torch. He and I were going to work together until he retired. I was going to take over his law firm. I lost that. Both
Your
of my
time is
parents-
up, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any questions? All righty, we have Jimmy Maddox and Michelle East. You're on deck.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jimmy Maddox. I've been a pharmacist in Alabama for 50 years. I'm here today to tell you about a troubling experience I had with this regulatory board. In 2009, I was placed on probation for 15 years and fined $20,000 for 2 counts. I had 6 months to pay the fine. A few days later, in person, my wife and I went to the board office and paid the fine. Later, an attorney told me the maximum fine allowable per statute should have been $2,000, $1,000 per count. For 15 years, though, I heard nothing from the board. Then, in early March of this year, at the end of my probation, I was expecting an email from the board stating that I had paid my fine and the probation was over. But instead, I received an email claiming that the board had no record of my payment, and I had 6 months to pay the fine again. This was shocking because I'd already paid the fine, but the board's records were flawed. Despite my efforts, I couldn't retain the canceled checks from my bank because their records did not go back 15 years. I later discovered the person responsible for tracking the fines had kept a handwritten ledger and was no longer with the board. I find it very alarming that the regulatory board would operate with such poor record keeping. Had I simply paid this $20,000 again, I'm sure the board would have accepted it without question. But early August, a few weeks ago, I emailed the board requesting documentation that showed I had 6 months to pay the fine again. 3 days later, I received an email stating, according to our executive director, your payment was paid. I emailed back and asked for a receipt to avoid further issues, and it took about a week to receive a response. The unsigned response simply stated, Dear Mr. Maddox, payment for this fine issued with consent order dated March 10, 2009 for $20,000 was received. No additional monies are required. I feel this board has failed to demonstrate good stewardship of state funds. They seem to be operating more like a private company than a state regulatory board. I was left wondering if the $20,000 I paid was ever even deposited into the board's account. In my mind, was it even embezzled? We'll never know. I urge this committee to consider these serious concerns and enact sweeping changes to clean up this mess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of the members of the speaker? All righty. Michelle East, you're up. Charles Cook, you're on deck.
I was just going to let y'all know that I appreciate y'all giving
Mike,
me
closer to your mouth, please, and talk louder.
I was just going to let y'all know that I appreciate the opportunity that y'all going to let me speak, but I would like to yield my time to Joseph Krebs, if that's feasible. Okay.
Starting now, Joseph Krebs, you have 2 minutes, 57 seconds.
Thank you. Reforming this board's composition is crucial for maintaining proper checks and balances. There's no consumer member on this board. And the reason there's not is because these board members for decades have not wanted that oversight and accountability. And that's very important to understand. There's no pharmacy technician members. There's areas of pharmacy practice that are not represented at all. Compounding. Some of the pharmacists on the board do compounding, but there's no compounding pharmacists. There's no long-term care pharmacists. So these are issues. In the significant issue number 1 and significant issue number 2, I can explain to you in great detail. I don't have time right now, but if you have questions, I'll answer them about it. Everything that they said in their report, in their response, is false. Everything. The reason that they did those things and moved that money around is because once the issue came up with Mr. East, they started retaliating against me and my clients. Retaliating against licensees because I was their lawyer. Now, why do they hate me? Because I'm the one who has shown them through this process that the gig is up. And so they don't like me for that. And so they started retaliating against me and my clients. So after that, I started filing public records requests. And I discovered unbelievable things about what this board's doing, the amount of money they're bringing in, and how corrupt they are. In 2023, they attempted to make it seem like the fines were dropping to $198,000, while nearly $600,000 mysteriously appeared as miscellaneous income. I filed a records request, and I asked for the $600,000, and they denied it. I filed a records request asking for all of those deferral agreements, and they denied it. They don't understand what a public records request is or what the law is related to that because they deny them if they think that it's going to have information in it that is damaging to them. This board failed to give licensees proper notice of today's hearing. They don't want licensees here. They don't care anything about the licensees. The only thing they care about is collecting money and funneling it to their own pockets. Pharmacists are terrified to speak up because the board retaliates against them. You can read the comments and see this board retaliates against licensees. Pharmacists in this state are terrified of this board. The entire system at this board, from licensing to investigations and complaints to hearings, is unfair, rigged, and unconstitutional.
Your time is up, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, question by Pro Tem Pringle.
Who is paying for this court reporter taking all this down? I mean, this is the only board that has a court reporter present. Who's paying for it?
We are.
You're paying for it? Will you share what she writes for this committee?
Absolutely.
I just don't. Why all of a sudden we have to have a court reporter in the room?
Because we're in litigation.
Can I answer that question?
I asked you.
It's because they project what they're doing on everyone else. And so they need a court reporter here because they have trouble telling the truth about anything. So they need a court reporter here to make sure that everybody else is telling the truth when, in fact, they're the ones who are not telling the truth. And that is the truth.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the speaker?
I have one question that you know the answer.
Senator Gavan?
So going back to one of the previous speakers, how long, like you got 5 years to make a bar complaint. How long do you have to make a pharmacist complaint? I mean, you may not know that, but...
It just depends on what the issue is. Most of the time, if it's a misdemeanor under the code, then you have a year, which if you go back through and look through all their final orders, they don't do that. And I'll tell you this, in 2024, they have stopped basically doing anything. They haven't been hearing many cases. They haven't collected much money. If you went through and looked at all their activity for 2024, they've shut it down. Why did they do that? Because they tried to fool the examiners, and they're trying to fool this committee. Last month, they started filing statements of charges again in July for bogus, frivolous charges for stuff that happened 2 years ago. And they set it for hearing in September. Why did they do that?
Were those misdemeanors or felonies?
They're misdemeanors. I mean, I don't think they can charge felonies. But here's the thing. This board, they don't have respect for this committee. They don't give a rat, whatever, about what's going on. And they have cranked the money printer back up starting next month. If this committee does not shut this board down immediately, pharmacy in Alabama is over, period. This is an emergent situation. And I hope everybody on this committee understands that, because everything that they've said and all these excuses are just that, excuses. And for her, it's mind-boggling. I could talk about this literally for probably the next 3 months. And y'all would be bored to tears, but you would have all the information. So if y'all have further questions.
Senator Kelly, you're recognized for a further question.
Yes. So you've made accusations of corruption, and you've thrown out some examples and some loosely worded things. Can you give me 3 specific examples that hasn't been voiced yet, or that needs clarification?
Well, starting with how charges are brought, the executive secretary is the board, the attorney, and the executive secretary. They do not follow the law when it comes to how they bring charges. There is a spreadsheet or a flow chart that they provided that shows clearly. Most of these board members, they see this stuff at the end, but they bury their head in the sand because they don't want to know. So I would say the fact that they are bringing charges without board approval, and if you look at the law is very clear. It requires investigators to go out and investigate claims and bring those investigative reports to the board, not to the executive secretary, not to the attorney, not to any of those things. There's an email from back in 2023 that the attorney who's here today sent. It was over a $1,000 maximum violation. And the licensee simply emailed and said, hey, what do I need to do to settle this? And because their goal is to raise money and generate revenue, and it has nothing to do with the public safety of the state of Alabama. Her email response to them was, you can have a public consent order for $7,250 on a $1,000 violation, or you can pay us $14,500 and we'll keep it hush-hush with a deferral agreement, and nobody's going to know about this. That is extortion. The other issue I would say is these board members are prosecuting and collecting illegal fines and illegal fees, junk fees, and they're funneling that money to themselves. They're making a fortune. Think about this. In 2013, the late fees at this board were $11,000 in 2013. They passed rules and statutes and all these things. Why did they do that? In 2022, late fees rose to $175,000. That is a 1,500% increase. This is not the regulation of a profession. This is organized crime, in my opinion, and it's extortion. And it's all in black and white. This isn't my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions of the speaker? Sir?
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charles Cook. And Stephen McCormick, you're on deck.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Representative Wilcox and committee. My name is Charlie Cook. I'm the Director of Pharmacy for Mobile Medical Center down in Baldwin and Mobile counties. I've been a pharmacist for about 20 plus years in the state of Alabama after graduating from Auburn. I've worked in a number of hospitals in the state, and I've been attending our state board of pharmacy meetings for several years now. I was also on the board of the Alabama Society of Health System Pharmacists, sitting as one of the legislative chairs working with our state board. I want to commend our pharmacy board for the work and progress that they have made over the several years that I've been in contact with them and working with them. I've observed them and attended the meetings. I had a lot to say about COVID, but Mrs. Yeatman's already expressed that, but I will want to say that I back everything she said. When we were in hospitals during that time, supplies were very hard to get, and they came in and helped us with that. Their priority is to keep the citizens of Alabama safe and to keep Alabama progressing in the face of the constant changes in healthcare that have caused many to leave the healthcare profession, pharmacists, nurses, doctors. The Executive Secretary, Donna Yeatman, has done a great job in increasing communication to pharmacists and pharmacy technicians with our Executive Secretary report, where we can now send it out to over 100 pharmacists and technicians in our system who cannot attend the board meetings. Dr. Cobb, Dr. Garman, and Dr. Mount have led workshops to work with pharmacists in institutional retail settings to work and open dialogue on how to make the workplace settings better in the environment we are currently working in, because right now it's very hard to work in healthcare. Dr. Nolan has done a phenomenal job in working with the medical board on collaborative practice between the physicians and pharmacists, and Dr. Alverson and Dr. Anderson working with the investigator Todd Brooks and Casey Shaw to review and keep compliant compounding pharmacies in the state have been diligent in educating and keeping pharmacies accountable to keep patients safe. They work together as a team, which seems like a thankless job most of the time, only hearing complaints and seeing people upset when they keep them accountable. Just a word on the investigators. I've worked with other boards, specifically when I was the narcotic compliance officer at Children's of Alabama in Birmingham, dealing with diversion in hospitals, and the pharmacy investigators are doing a good job as well with the number of pharmacies that they have to cover in our state. They're committed to doing the right thing, and I can say that because our system actually was fined a couple of years ago, all to say that they are wanting to do the right thing, and I have worked with them. The only thing that I would add to this committee to ask for consideration is what the previous speaker said, is looking into maybe adding 2 more positions to this committee, one of them being an elected hospital position and the other being one that is from academia. Right now, the 4 out of the 5 historically normally have a retail background. Now, they do have some hospital experience, but if you would consider that, to add those 2 to it, and I have nothing else to add.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of this speaker? All righty. Thank you, sir. Stephen McCormick, you're up. James Jones, you're on deck. Lieber Lee, you're in the hole.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee. I don't have any prepared statements. Just came here to, the reason this came up, my first 10 years in government, I worked for an agency and dealt with Sunset Committee. And maybe it was the month previous, maybe 2 months prior, I was at a public hearing. They announced that there was going to be a sunset hearing. And after the meeting, I said, as industry, as representing the hospital association, I'd be glad to give a couple of points about what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years. When I worked for the government, we had sunset hearings. Industry speakers about the board were always helpful. And so I obliged to do that. And so as Ms. Yeatman and the Secretary had mentioned, COVID was a very difficult time. We had several issues with the board. We came to them no different than any other member of the public and talked to them about our concerns, our issues. And one I'll tell you about, because we have mentioned a few before, was metered dose inhalers. Obviously, that was a big issue during COVID. We were prescribing them for inpatients, and then when they left the hospital, they were being thrown away. We started a really bad issue of we're running out. We don't have the supply necessary. We went to the board, talked to them. Is there a way that we could send these prescriptions home with somebody and not waste what we have in a, quite frankly, a shortage or a dire need? Worked with them just like they would anybody else. got those issues worked out, got an emergency rule put in place, and we were able to help more patients send those home with those meter dose inhalers. And that has happened several times since then, issues that have come up. 24-hour pharmacy is not necessarily the thing it was 10 or 15 years ago. Not a pharmacist, I'm a lawyer, so I can't speak to the reasons, but patients go home after an emergency room visit without medication they need. So we've worked on issues like that several times. Again, I have zero knowledge of what's in their significant findings. I have zero knowledge about any of the things that have been talked about. I just want to be clear that just here to say, as an industry, as the hospital association, we've worked with them very well. They've answered our call. Now, have they done everything? Absolutely not. But we've had conversations, and the things that have gone on, we've been very respectful and appreciative.
Any questions of this speaker?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. James Jones, you're up. Libra Lee, you're on deck.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. Let me assure you up front, I am not being paid. Nobody's twisted my arm, and I have not been threatened to say anything I'm about to say. So we'll get that out of the way up front. But my name is James Jones. I'm from Prattville. I graduated from Auburn in 1984 and have been a practicing pharmacist in this state since 1985. I'd like to make a few comments about the board and some of the positive things that they do. This board is very proactive in our profession. We, the staff, the investigators, all the board members, they provide us with continuing education. They're constantly involved in our professional daily lives. They keep us informed on the laws that change and even inform us when there's been medical hearings and doctors have had discipline on their license and we don't need to fill their prescriptions. We'd have no other way to find this out were it not for our board. They're very involved, regulatory as well as professional. I run into these board members, the investigators, and the staff at our professional meetings with the Pharmacy Association, as well as regulatory. The investigators come in our stores and do our evaluations at least every 2 years. Sometimes they're by more often than that, but they have a large workload. But always professional, always courteous, always nice to us. Never have I had a complaint, and if I'd had a complaint, I would have exposed it. But my involvement with this board is that they're driven by a moral compass to always do what's right. They got where they are by that moral compass. And I believe that integrity versus character. Character is what you got when people see what you're doing. Integrity is what you have when you do the right thing and nobody's looking. And my experience with this board is that the ultimate integrity to everyone involved, from Donna to her staff to the investigators to all the board members, they have hard decisions to make. But I believe that this board and their staff do everything they can, even when it's not easy, to make sure that the citizens in the state of Alabama are protected. The hard decisions from pharmacy discipline to large corporations driven by the almighty dollar. I always trust these guys to make the right decisions and provide the best and correct outcomes. Yes, they have different personalities. Yes, they come from different backgrounds, different practice settings. But they're all driven by the same moral code, to always do what's right to protect the citizens of the state of Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of this speaker? Appreciate your time. Libra Lee, you're up, and you're our final speaker.
Don't worry, I'm very familiar with lowering the microphone. Good morning, Congressmen and women. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak to you today. My name is Libra Lee, and I'm the president of the Alabama Society of Health System Pharmacists, also known as ALSHP. ALSHP exists to promote, develop, and unite pharmacy practitioners in the pursuit of providing optimal patient care across all healthcare settings. ALSHP serves many important functions throughout the state, including offering continuing education opportunities, facilitating communication and networking of health system pharmacists, and promoting pharmacy as an essential component of the healthcare system. ALSHP supports and lobbies for the advancement of professional practice standards to optimize patient care. Our daily responsibilities and challenges as an inpatient pharmacy are vastly different than our retail counterparts. For instance, at a medium-sized hospital, we have 50 to 100 pharmacists in the institution with just as many pharmacy technicians. I will be representing over 1,000 inpatient pharmacy staff today. On behalf of ALSHP, I would like to commend the Alabama Board of Pharmacy for their work and support of health system pharmacists across the state of Alabama as we serve the patients in our community. Federal law mandates that pharmacies are required to be in alignment with sterile compounding regulations known as USP Pharmacopoeia 797 and 800 regulations. The board has acted as a resource to inpatient pharmacies, providing guidance and proper implementation and ongoing compliance with these regulations. Additionally, based on the critical nature of sterile compounding, the board has mandated pharmacists annual continuing education for those who practice in these areas to ensure safety for the patients of Alabama. As previously mentioned, they also are very approachable, and they do attend our annual meeting and our summer meetings, as well as the Alabama Pharmacists Association, to give us guidance on those different rule changes regarding USP 797 and 800. As healthcare continues to advance with technology, the board has been proactive to update rules and regulations to promote healthcare in our state, such as clarifying language around automated dispensing cabinets and increasing pharmacist to technician ratios. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the board worked tirelessly to expand access to patient care and ensure our patient safety. The board sought out advice and created a pathway for trained pharmacy technicians to administer vaccinations, which allowed for more patients in the state of Alabama to be protected against severe COVID-19 outcomes. As previously mentioned, they also allowed for the administration of monoclonal antibodies by a trained pharmacist in different emergency department and outpatient infusion settings. Additionally, in the state of Alabama, there are only 2 24/7 retail pharmacies, which can be a significant barrier to optimal care, as previously mentioned. The board approved regulation to allow patients who are seen in the emergency department to take a dose of a medication home as long as it was not a controlled medication and was labeled appropriately. In collaboration with the Alabama Board of Medical Examiners, the board recently enacted regulations to allow for expansion of pharmacy services under the guidance of physicians to allow for further expansion and outreach of healthcare in our communities. As most of you know, there's certain counties in the state that do not have any practicing physicians, but there is a pharmacy there, and we can actually expand the services for those patients in those rural communities. Based on what I've previously mentioned, the board works with ALSHP to enhance the availability of healthcare for patients in the state of Alabama.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker from the members? Thank you for your time. The moment we've all been waiting for, members, your questions are up. Who would first like to be recognized to ask questions? Pro Tem Pringle, you're recognized.
I'm not sure I made myself clear earlier when I was asking these questions of other boards. What I'm seeing is a disproportionate number of seats set aside for minorities on the board based on the number of licensees that board has that are minorities, okay? And I'm looking at your board, and clearly you have at least 10% minorities in your profession, and yet you have no representation. What I'm trying to get to is, are we going to start trying to balance out, the representation that reflects the makeup of the licensees of the board? Because y'all have 0.
Yes, sir. I will say that we did have a minority who rolled off recently. However, we understand we have actually the statute is laid out that the actual process is not done through the board. However, we have worked with the different organizations that are charged with that. And in the last election, there was a minority candidate, but he didn't win the election. So they're involved. It just hasn't come to fruition as yet.
Because y'all elect, right?
I'm sorry?
Don't y'all have an election?
Well, 2 of the seats are elected. 3 of the seats are appointed.
Because I looked at this, I couldn't tell how many. Clearly, you've got 10%, but you don't disclose how many your membership by race or gender.
Well, we started asking that question, but it's optional. So what you have is what was reported to us.
I just, again.
And that's also, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's also all pharmacists that are licensed with this, not just Alabama residents. So we probably could tailor that down a little bit more to give you a better figure of those minorities.
I think these licensure boards need to reflect. And I think boards need to do more to recruit minority people.
Yes, sir.
I really do. I think they should.
And
these professional licensees.
I completely agree, and we've done that, but we need to take it up a notch for sure.
And I don't think we're doing a good job. Not y'all's fault, but thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Gavan, you're recognized.
Thank you. This is one of, we deal with a lot of boards, and this is one that I think is probably near the top of the list of, the important professional groups that need to be monitored. I mean, so many lives are at stake based upon what's dispensed and how it's dispensed. And, the scary thing, I remember learning this from from pharmacy students when I was at Auburn, is how much more pharmacists knew about drug interactions and medicines than the doctors, came close to that are prescribing it. So y'all are, your organization represents a group of people that are a safety net for the consumers of Alabama. This is one of the worst reports, and I hadn't been on the Sunset Committee very long, but it's one of the worst reports, if not the worst one I've seen. I would recommend that the board start working post-haste to remedy these issues, because the best scenario I see happening right now is a one-year review.
Yes, sir. And we have begun already working on all of the issues, but I completely understand your sentiment. Yes, sir.
Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate y'all being here with us. I wanted to look at the significant issue 2024-004 on the report that's on page 17. And in it, I'll just read just one sentence. The Alabama Board of Pharmacy is executing statements of charges against applicants not yet licensed by the board. And when it's described a little bit further in there, it's basically initial licenses from entities or individuals from out of state.
Not
I'm
just
correct,
out of state.
but some are.
But some are, yes, sir.
Yeah, that are, and I guess that's what I'll focus on this one, that are out of state, so they are not licensed by the board as of yet, and there was something that caused a fine or a penalty in the other state, of
Correct.
which I assume they paid. And so what I'm asking is not necessarily your ability or not ability to do something, but more of the purpose of finding an entity that is not licensed prior to them coming into the state, the purpose or what you're trying to accomplish with that for the protection of the citizens of Alabama.
It's probably a twofold. You are correct that in some instances it has to do with some type of offense or violation in another state. In some cases, it's kind of what I referred to earlier in my, too long introduction, but it will be a facility that we have serious concerns about whether or not they're going to be safe. And it's based on the FDA will go in and do an inspection, and they may identify things, bacterial, non-septic techniques, and those type things that would not comply with our rules. So we bring them in and have them basically explain to the 5 board members what they've done, what needs to go forward. In some of those instances, we've put an exorbitant amount of time, as we should, as an agency, to go through that and get that information together. And if they are able, this is where you'll see some of the deferral agreements, if they're able to show that they have complied with everything that needs to be done, and then we kind of monitor them for that period of the deferral process. I understand your point, and again, and this is not to say that there doesn't need to be, but we can't make changes. This is a process that's been in place. We had been, and I say for me, I had been under the impression that you could not deny an application unless there was a hearing. And as we went through this process, we went from one attorney to the other, but we had been under AG oversight, and we were never told that, we were actually told it was okay to proceed with those statements of charges. So
You were told by who on that?
we've been under Tara Hetzel with the Attorney General's office for the last 2 years.
Okay, so the Attorney General approves of that process?
Yes, sir.
Specifically, yeah.
Yeah, we have sent, we have the documentation where the information is emailed to her, and we say, this looks like a statement of charges based on these violations, and she would respond, agree. Now, that being said, we've gone back to her, and she's working with us to identify what another process could be. What we don't want is we don't want to deny everyone. That's not right. But we also don't want to grant everyone. So we've got to figure out what that process is to ensure that we're safeguarding the citizens of Alabama, but giving the individuals who wish to practice here their opportunity.
Sure, and from my perspective, the optics are what's bad.
in that. The
I can
optics
appreciate
are, a pay-to-play kind of thing. It's the optics of it that I have concerns about.
I understand, and I mean, I know it's just my words, but I can assure you that is, every time we're looking at these, it is absolutely from the standpoint of, if it were my child or my grandmother that was going to receive this, are they acceptable to do that? Do they have the qualifications and the processes in place to take care of patients?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Representative Simpson, you're recognized. Senator Kelly, you're on deck.
I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the difficulty of the job that you guys have, and you have a very important job to come here. I don't want to challenge your integrity because I don't know. We're not going to be able to see these things through here. Part of the issue that I have and part of the concern that I have is, I know this is the Sunset Committee, but there is a lack of sunlight in your program, in your department, and in your board. With the deferred prosecutions, things that, I'm not saying you're sweeping things under the rug. There is a appearance of, if you were sweeping things under the rug, there's nothing that we would be able to see these things.
Understood.
For the purpose of serving the public, what you guys do as a public role, there has to be some form of oversight where the public can be seen, can know what you're doing. That's our responsibility, is to check in on you to make sure you're there. But when we don't get the full picture, when we don't get the understanding of, well, what is a deferred? Why are we doing deferreds? Do we have some in-house prosecutions that we're handling that we're not disclosing to the examiner's office? That starts to raise a number of red flags. And you and I have talked, and so I'm not jumping up and down and trying to, Madam Chair, I'm not going prosecutor on the mode here. Thank you. But there is concerns that we have a duty to the public to let the public be aware of what's happening.
Understood.
Unfortunately, you guys are the front lines of facing the mental health problem and the opioid addiction and the problems that so many of our communities have. We rely on you to be able to protect the public. But if there's a concern of who's watching the watchers, if y'all sweep things under the rug, if nobody knows what's going on, if people can pay double the required fine or X number of higher than the required fine or what the code says to follow, then there is an appearance of, I can commit an offense, pay this, the public would never know what's going on, and no one's going to ever have to catch us. I'm not saying y'all are doing that. I'm saying your lack of transparency creates the potential appearance of that being a situation. I certainly agree with Senator Gavan about, I'm not jumping up and down to saying, you got to be disbanded immediately because you're too important of a role. But what I am saying is we need to see some changes, and we need some changes significantly faster with your involvement with the Department of Public Examiners, with your involvement with this committee. And I'd like to make sure that the public has the protection to the trust in your agency, because if they can't trust you, we're in for a world of hurt.
Agreed. And again, to go back to that, just because that's the way that when you're in that position and that's what you've been doing and you know what you're doing is right, it didn't click about what it might look from the outside. And so that's another issue that we've been addressing with the AG's office and we'll be addressing internally. And I would like the opportunity to follow up with the examiners after we have some ideas to make sure that this would be what would be appropriate and what the committee would be pleased with.
All right. Chair's just excused herself for just a second. Senator Kelly, you were up next.
Yes. Some of the comments that were just expressed were a lot more eloquent than I would have put them. Whenever I look at this, to say I'm concerned is an extreme understatement. Virtue to say, in my opinion, if this had been any other committee or any other group that didn't have the necessary, it would be lights out, sunset, no question. Been a lot of comments today about corruption, money being shuffled here, there. That's been addressed to some degree. One of the things that was interesting and that I would like to know why the bid laws weren't followed on the vehicle purchases.
Yes, sir. So there were 2 vehicles purchased. They were purchased by our then chief investigator. He's not here with us because he passed away last March, but he had been our vehicle maintenance person or took care of the purchases and our fleet and had been doing that for the 20-plus years that he had been there. So I can't tell you specifically what he may or may have done because I can't speak with him. But I can tell you that based on the invoices and knowing the gentleman, he was trying to buy from someone under a master agreement. The invoices we got said state bid. What we failed to do was to follow up and ensure that the master agreement was still in force. And unfortunately, it was not. So that's why we didn't bid it out because I can only assume based on his character that he thought he was buying on state bid. It's the same place that he had told me he'd worked with the same gentleman to buy cars numerous times before. We just failed to follow up and make sure the master agreement was still in place.
Oh, that's a logical explanation for that. Thank you for that. In looking through this report, and I know what you had said when you initially spoke about the percentage of respondents versus the number of licensees, but the repetitiveness of the words retaliatory being mentioned. And then you've heard what's been said this morning. And then looking at the comments about spending on office, who knows what that's about, but the various things. So I would just like to know what your comments would be back to when you got this number of accusations of retaliatory actions. I understand sometimes people get mad and they don't get what they want, so they can make accusations, but there are more than just one or two in here. So
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what your thoughts or your comments are on that.
I'm going to tailor my thoughts, and I'm happy to speak offline if you want my personal opinion, but as board secretary, all I can tell you is we try very hard to be approachable. Part of that outreach is going and being present and going to the schools and going to these meetings so that people can get to know us and know that we're approachable, and that at no point, I can tell you, I've never done anything in any way retaliatory, and I don't believe that any of our staff would either. I cannot explain why others would have that perception. I would say that if they do, I would love to sit down and talk with them and identify what it is and the manner in which we are conducting business or the manner in which we're communicating that would give them that feeling, because I'd very much like to remedy that.
Okay. Honestly, with this report, we could be here all day. Extremely, extremely, extremely troubling. We'll see where it goes. Thank you.
Senator Barfoot, you're recognized.
Thank you. Ms. Yateman, I want to echo some of the comments that have already been made here. Senator Gavan expressed concern about the number of significant findings, some of them more serious maybe certainly than the others. We've heard Representative Underwood express the perception, and I think that's always important, right?
Yes, sir.
But let's try to dig down into a couple of these just to separate what's really there, why it's there. And let me take a moment to, I'm an attorney. Sometimes I heard acting on legal advice, and maybe that legal advice has been challenged by, whether or not it was actually accurate or not. I want you to pipe in when you can on any of these significant issues that I raise, or even some that I don't, that if you were given legal advice, how that affected your decision if you followed that legal advice, okay?
Okay.
So on the significant issue number one, and that is the miscellaneous income, what I will call generally fines and fees, and how those fines and fees were categorized at one point and then moved to another category. If you can, tell me why that was done.
So when we transitioned from one attorney to the other, we were working with the AG. We were trying to catch up on some cases. I will say, and it was kind of mentioned earlier by a previous comment, there were some allegations. There was a complaint that came into the Board of Pharmacy directly alleged at me for corruption and any number of other things. When that complaint came in, I immediately had it sent to the AG's office because it would have been inappropriate for anyone in our office to investigate me. The AG's office investigated that complaint for 6 months. They investigated me, they investigated the board staff, and they found no evidence or any wrongdoing on the part of myself or board staff. During that 6-month time, as we were going through that, things did slow down a bit as we were going through that process. When we started going back to dealing with individuals and entities, there were more agreements, settlements made. And when those settlements were made, the new attorney wrote that as administrative cost. So the order was written a little bit differently. So when it was submitted to the accountant didn't put it in fines and fees because it was written as administrative cost. So it was put into miscellaneous income. Because you can't, and this is my understanding, and I'm not an accountant, but you can't put a line item on the revenue part that says cost. So it went into miscellaneous income. All that being said, I can only tell you that now knowing what we know, should have termed it differently, should have had an individual line item. There was no intention. I mean, I look at the bottom line, not necessarily every category. So to me, every dollar was accounted for, and what bucket it was put in didn't seem to be an issue because all of the money was being reported on the financial statement.
Okay. So that was not an internal decision to reclassify that money, when I say from the board or from you as the director?
No, sir, absolutely not.
All right. Let me skip along to the second issue, deferral agreements.
Deferral agreements.
Well, let me ask you a question about
Yes,
that
sir.
first. So give me an idea of what the board may have, authority the board may have, a violation that a deferral agreement might be appropriate.
So again, my understanding, not being an attorney, I do have to rely on the attorney's expertise, but my understanding is deferral agreements and consent orders were appropriate as part of the settlement process. Once there had been a statement of charges, settlements are an opportunity for individuals, and deferrals were an option that they could use. In many conversations that we had had with representatives from the AG's office, they were aware we were doing deferral agreements. And because we weren't told to stop or there was any issue with it, and we'd had the two-way communication, we were unaware that we'd ever have a finding because we felt that we were doing things appropriately.
But so give me an example of what type of a violation might be offered a deferral agreement.
So a classic one would be, one of the requirements for pharmacists is if you change where you work, you have 10 days to let the board know. That's because we need to know who's around and who's in control and who's dealing with medications, particularly controlled substances.
And that's a regulation, board regulation?
Yes.
Okay.
So if a pharmacist notified us on day 12, we offer a deferral agreement because that would allow the individual to say, I messed up. I've had this one time. I didn't notify the board. I'm going to be good for whatever period of time the board chooses, and they don't end up with a mark on their permanent record. One of the things that's important to understand is that for pharmacists in practice, particularly if they're going to be an owner, if they have discipline on their license, it makes it very difficult for them to get contracts with different third parties, PBMs, and being able to take insurance. If you can't take an insurance, it's really going to cause a significant issue to you being able to conduct business. So when there are issues like that, that is a record keeping or a paperwork issue that has no impact from that standpoint, being 2 days late on patient care, that would be an appropriate use of a deferral agreement.
Okay. And again, if that deferral agreement is not a possibility for that individual, what are the adverse effects for that pharmacist?
So if they're entering into settlement discussions and we say, okay, and it's $500 for a consent order, which is discipline on your license, or we'll offer you a $1,000 deferral. the individual can come back and go, I really can't do that. Would you consider 750? That information is taken back to the 5-member board, and they will determine whether or not. Or they can just say, I'll take the consent order, or they'll say, I don't want to do either one. And this has happened where it's, someone had an issue, an extreme situation. They're like, I want to just come before the board and explain. And I've seen where the board will just dismiss based on what occurred after hearing from the respondent.
So those deferral agreements are not, but those deferral agreements are not offered to everybody. There are circumstances where an individual's conduct on the board may think is so egregious that they don't offer deferral. Is that correct?
That's correct. And sometimes they won't even enter into settlement discussions. They'll say, we really need to hear the particulars of this situation.
Again, so that gentleman, female, pharmacist that is 2 days late, by your example, if a deferral agreement is not, if there's no such thing legally as a deferral agreement, right, there has to be disciplinary measures taken according to the regulations. Is that correct?
Yes, unless they go through a hearing and then the board could again decide to dismiss it, but yes. But it's a violation and would have to be heard, yes.
Right, assuming that that's correct, that there wasn't paperwork submitted and
correct.
Everything done correct, that would be a violation. And what are the adverse consequences in real life on that person by missing a paperwork by 2 days if the deferral agreement isn't offered to them?
Well, I'll tell you, speaking as a pharmacist, one, it's a negative mark on your license. It is forever on your license that you were disciplined, which all of you professionals, you don't want anything attached to your license. Number two, depending on what your practice setting is, or if you're going to own a business, there can be difficulties getting positions depending on what you're trying to do. Some companies are like, if you have any discipline on your license, we're not going to hire you, even though this is, in the grand scheme of things, not a significant issue, but it's still discipline. Or like I said before, we've had pharmacy owners that have had issues being able to conduct business because they can't get contracts.
Okay, so I laid that out in terms of a pharmacist or a pharmacy owner. Are there, and I know the answer to this because it's read through here, but tell me what other, besides pharmacists and pharmacy owners, does the board regulate?
So technicians, we regulate students, intern, externs, because they're actually practicing in pharmacy while they're in pharmacy school, so they have a registration. We regulate manufacturers, we regulate distributors, wholesalers, 503B outsourcers, which are like a subsection of compounding pharmacies. We regulate third-party logistics providers. We regulate retail medical oxygen suppliers, retail medical oxygen manufacturers.
In terms of those distributors, wholesalers, we're talking about nationwide, national corporations. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And so in that situation, most of those entities have licenses in all 50 states, or some semblance of multiple licensure. Most states, and I've confirmed this with the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, what they sent me, maybe most would be a little overstated. There are a lot. Significant number of other states do what they call sister state discipline. So if you hold a license in, say, your home state of Wyoming, and you violate something in Alabama, if that violation in Alabama is also a violation in Wyoming, Wyoming will take action against your license. And I'm using Wyoming as just an example. I don't know a specific time. But that's another reason why a lot of entities, again, only when it's not an issue from a safety or well-being position for citizens of Alabama, they will request deferrals with maybe a corrective action plan or something to show that, look, we know we messed up, we're going to fix it. Can you work with us so that we don't have this cascade of discipline through every state that we're licensed in?
On the deferral side of the equation, we see that in the courtrooms where an individual may be a first-time DUI offender who blew below a certain level. And in order to, if the court thinks it's appropriate, and if there's a mechanism in place in that jurisdiction, they may offer deferral agreement. What I would say to you about that is, and I don't know the answer to this, but if y'all do not have a written explanation or here are the items or here are the violations that could be subject to the deferral, I would suggest to you that's a pretty good idea,
Yes,
rather than
sir.
them just shooting from the hip to say, well, we'll take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, sir.
Moving on, and I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit longer time than I thought, but the fine amounts exceeding the statutory limits. Now, we're not talking about the diversion type program, the deferral.
Right.
Explain that to me, because that's concerning, but explain that to me as to why, or you thought y'all had the authority to fine something, an individual or a business, more than what statutory or regulation amounts deemed that you could.
But again, I will tell you that my understanding when I came to the board was that when you look at per violation, as an example, if you have a out-of-state pharmacy that doesn't have a permit and they ship into the state, each shipment was a violation. That's how it was presented to me. And that's how the statements of charges had been written up by the previous attorneys. I will say, and again, I know I keep stating it, but just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean that we should continue. But I do know in a lot of cases when you're dealing with a large corporation, and we've seen this, they can send 264 shipments in, and if we charge them $1,000, they'll just keep shipping without getting a permit, and we won't be able to regulate it. So to your point, at least I think I understand your point, that maybe we need to just make that more clear if we're going to, or find a way to make that more substantial, for lack of a better word.
Well, I would say either through this body, through the legislature, to have statutory language. Number two, maybe from a regulatory standpoint, the regulations. But then even just on the practical side of the equation, on the deferrals, a list of violations that are eligible, at least initially eligible for that deferral, where we have to Representative Simpson's standpoint, we know that if you have a deferral, if you're eligible for deferral, you're not out there committing felonies. I mean, it's something that's a violation, but maybe a minor violation. So there's some transparency there.
Yes, sir.
And then I think, and I won't go through all of these because it is concerning. There are a lot. But I understand one of these, and I can't remember which one it is, that where there was an application and maybe a hearing on an application, and I don't have my original copy, but a hearing on an application, that there was an applicant had to pay, for lack of a better word, a court cost, a fee to be heard by the board. Explain that to me. If you're not licensing them, but they've applied for an application, why would they have to pay for a hearing?
Well, if they're denied, they are not charged for the hearing.
Okay.
If they are granted, there is basically an administrative cost or a court cost for the fact that we had to hear the case.
Why would somebody, if I'm applying for, certainly I'm not qualified as a pharmacist, probably not qualified to do anything that the board would regulate me on. Pharmacy tech, what training does that have?
Well, it depends.
Could I qualify as a pharmacy tech? Or tell me something
Yes.
that...
Yeah, I mean, by rule, you just have to be 17 years old, pass the background check, pay the fee, and complete a training program that the board has approved within 6 months.
Okay.
There are technicians who have received significant training and are certified, but that's the minimum level. So essentially, on-the-job training, for lack of a better word.
If I applied for that position, what does the board do to look at my application, and why would there be a need to have a hearing?
So I will tell you, and it's a long answer, but I'll try to make it very succinct. When I came into this role, I asked the board members, when we have applications and there are things on a background check, what do you want the board office to approve? I don't feel that as executive secretary, I should be making those decisions. The board members are the ones that were elected and appointed, and they've been chosen. Over time, that list of things that when you look at it, the board has said, we don't need to hear this case. We don't need to hear this. This
And you're
is
saying
something.
don't need to hear it, as in we're going to deny them?
No, we're going to go ahead and grant.
Okay.
This is something like a DUI, but it was 15 years ago, as an example. We don't need to hear that. There's been no other things, and you disclosed it. But other things like felony possession of marijuana, controlled substance issues, embezzlement, domestic violence. We had, they're going with knives. I mean, there's just things like that that we need to ensure we don't have someone who has anything that might not make them safe to practice in the pharmacy. And essentially, you just want to hear, have you addressed this? Are you in a good place now? Do you have the right temperament? Or you have good moral character so that we are confident that you can practice pharmacy in such a way to not cause any harm to the citizens of Alabama?
So essentially, without that hearing, you would be making a decision based on the four corners of a piece of paper, rejected or approved, without any other information.
Yes.
That hearing is an opportunity for that applicant, should they desire, to come in and explain certain things that are on that application. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Okay.
And two other points I'd like to make is the way we do this, if there is an applicant and there is something on their history that is not something that we as board staff can approve, they're sent a letter that says, there's been something on your background. You can't just be immediately approved. If you would like to proceed to a hearing before the board, please let us know. So they can withdraw at any point and there's no issue. The concern, if we were to automatically deny, if that is a board action to deny a technician, then we're required to report that to the National Practitioner Data Bank. And so now you have someone who may have just wanted to be a technician, didn't realize that there was an issue on their background, and if they're just straight up denied, now they've got a mark if they ended up wanting to go to nursing school or any other kind of health profession. And so we're trying really hard to make sure that whatever action is taken is not something that's going to follow these individuals long term, when it's something we could just sit down and talk with them and see if there is a necessity to deny an application.
I appreciate your explanations of those. Again, there's a lot of other significant issues. I'm not going to go through them right now. I think other members have made a point that there are issues that need to be cleaned up and addressed either by statutory legislative changes, maybe by regulatory changes, and I'm hopeful that you'll be able to do that in the next year.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Representative Underwood, you're up. Representative Shedd, you're on deck.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to ask you about, it's page 19, which is going to be significant issue 2024-008. And Mr. Anthony, I see you in the room, and I might just want a little clarification from you on this. Some of these questions kind of move into, more than just one, question straight to the board, but instead to all these different pieces that it goes to. Like, for instance, I had some questions about the vehicle purchase and it being, if that entity held itself out to be a approved dealer, of which, that's beyond our ability with the passing away of that person. But anyway, some of these questions kind of go outside of just your responses and the different entities that have been a part of this conversation. And so I wanted to know on this particular issue, it is a position that LSA has advised that, or agree with you that there is no need and that we aren't required to have fees set, whether by statutory or the administrative ruling. And I guess, I just want to kind of know what our thought process is on that, if that's okay, just for my own Q&A side. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
Madam Chairman, Committee, I think a couple of things by way of background, right? First off, obviously this was a conversation during the course of the examination, not a preemptive question about a rule at the time it was proposed, right? And I think two issues on it. Yeah. One is, the conversation was we're trying to justify what's been going on. And historically, the statute, I think, gives them authority to impose a fee up to an amount, and their rule is similar, so I'd call it a range, right? Okay. And the question I asked was, are you consistent in what you charge in the range? And the answer was yes, we're consistently charging the bottom of the range, and I said, I think that's far more defensible than having a variation or charging the upper of the range, right? And that was pretty much the extent of the conversation. I think from reading overnight the report and the response, I certainly agree with the examiners that the public is on better notice if there is a specific number as opposed to a range. And it sounds like the board's looking at making that change by administrative rule, which I think would be appropriate.
Okay, yeah. That's great. That's what I feel more appropriate about. That's more appropriate as well. It's bookends matter to me, and so that's kind of why I was.
Yes, sir.
Want to know what the advice was and the process of that. So I appreciate the history of that.
Yes, sir. And the truth is, and maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, but we try to be responsive to any member of the public that calls with a question. Certainly not trying to overstep on y'all's toes or the examiners or anybody else's. Yeah. But
no, not at all. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and thank you for being here too.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to move into one more question, if that's okay, Madam Chair, while I have the mic. This also is like an optics issue for me. If I look at on the report itself on page 42, she gave us a summary of the total incomes for the 4-year period that was being audited and the total expenditures in full, without any breakouts. And on the revenue side, the amount was $18.5 million over the 4-year time frame, and on the expenditure side, it was $19.4 million over that time frame, which is a $904,000 deficit. Meaning, we brought in about $1 million less over a 4-year time frame than we expensed, and my issue with that is the revenue stream of the 18.5 included all the late fees and all the fines and the penalties, which are about $2.9 million. And again, on the optics, it looks like we are incentivized, like we are required to have a certain amount of fines and penalties to operate at our current level. And that is an optic that it just looks bad. And so if we had a perfect year, which will never happen, and every single licensee in the state of Alabama did everything exactly right, and there was no fines and penalties to come in at all for a 3-year time frame, then you'd be forced with a decision to change the expenditure side or to raise the fees. And so I guess I'm asking about, that needs to be incorporated in your decision making and in your budgeting. I would find it difficult to require to require the fee amounts to be a part of my budget. I'd rather it not be. And we do our expenditures and our budget based on license fees and normal operations. And if fees come in, that's outside of what we have to for our normal everyday expenses.
And I completely agree with you. We are under, and I'm going to tell you what I know.
Okay.
As not an accountant, so I hope I present this properly.
All right.
We are under fund accounting, and over that 4-year period, we had $1 million in capital expenditures, which are not operating expenses. And when you took that $1 million out, we were flatlined. Those capital expenditures had to do with, we had to get a new elevator that should have a 20-year life expectancy. We had a new metal roof put on, which should have a 40-year life expectancy. Unfortunately, we had 4 bathrooms in our building that were not ADA compliant. So we had to have that changed because we need to be accessible. We also updated our website to make it ADA accessible. And so there's some other things. But there were things that are essentially one-time expenses that were done in order to make us more accessible.
Okay.
And take care of the building that we own for the states.
Ms.
Take care of their assets.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step.
No, you're,
Ms. Dixie, can I get a clarification from you? On these reports that list the revenue and expenses and the deficit, did it not include the $1 million that she's mentioning? In other words, I'm looking at cash flow here on operations. And does that incorporate what she was talking about?
The board did have some expenditures for those upgrades that she talked about with
Yeah.
the restrooms and all of that, and they're included in these expenditures, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. So your point is, if those were not in place, you would have cash flowed
Yes.
without, without
Yes, sir.
the fines being a part of it.
we would have, yes,
And
sir.
were those over the full 4-year time frame or just all in 1 year?
No, they were over the 4-year. I mean, unfortunately, when I got there, there was a lot of things that needed to be addressed with the building, and they were over that 4-year time frame.
Yeah, just randomly over each year.
Yes, sir.
So on here, they're listed maybe under repairs and maintenance or something? You don't have to be too specific, but it's on this report. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you, ma'am.
And I can email you specifics if that would be helpful.
It wouldn't. That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just looking at cash flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Representative Shedd, you're up.
I believe I heard today that you had a change in legal representation. I think that's right. I think.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When was that?
That was March of 22. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
We hired Ms. Newman in January, no, it'd been March of 23, excuse me. We hired Ms. Newman in January of 22. We had had the board attorney for over 40 years, and I was concerned about succession planning. So we brought in a second attorney to work together with the tenured attorney as a transition period.
Okay. And how long have you been in this position?
In September will be 6 years.
Thank you.
Pro Tem Pringle, you'd like to be recognized?
How old is this building on Village Drive?
How old is it? I think 20 to 25 years. I think when we replaced the roof, I think that was the first time it had been replaced, and the same with the elevator.
Because ADA's been in effect 25 years, and
I understand. Yes, sir.
hard to believe they built a building in the last 25 years that wasn't ADA compliant.
And I could be wrong. I wasn't with the board when they bought it, but that's what I recall.
But being a contractor, trust me, 90% of the bathrooms, I don't think we have a single ADA compliant bathroom in this building. Actually, we do, but it's behind a locked door, and I'm not going to tell you where it is.
Any other questions from the members?
I do have one more.
You got it.
I'm so sorry. I've been over this so much, and these clarification questions really helped me a lot.
Yes, sir.
On page 35, I think it is, the examiner mentioned the internal licensure review data, discussing the case numbers had the L's in them.
Yes, sir.
And I know initially those were left off of the batch that they used to pull their samples from, and they asked you for those, and then you did provide those for them. And when they did the reviews, I mean when they reviewed that, you stated that those with the L were for internal reviews. As opposed to like exterior complaints about particular pharmacists and such. And so my question is basically, how were those selected? I mean, the IRS sometimes does stuff just random, and I'm curious on all of those, how were they selected? Was it a criteria? Was it staff? Was it boards? I mean, how were those selected to be internally reviewed?
So all of the L cases, and the reason they're called L is because they're licensure cases. So they are coming through at the Board of Pharmacy. You have the licensing side that does exactly that, and then you have the enforcement side, which are the investigators. So on the licensing side, this one may be where we get that license application for a manufacturer that has all of these issues. And so it's looked at by the licensing manager, and then it's sent the information of anything that's not like they didn't tick all the boxes, or there's something in there that has raised some concern. Then that goes, it's emailed information to myself and board attorney. And in these situations, the process now is it's reviewed to see if what the licensing agent's concerns are a violation or could be an issue for practicing in the state of Alabama. And again, the recommendation would be from our attorney to the AG's office. And then if it was signed off on, then there would be a statement of charges. And those are just, again, they're licensing cases.
So it's based on applications basically and not random?
No, well, and it's not just applications. It could be a renewal. So one of the things that we ask on renewal is, have you had any arrests or any issues since your previous renewal?
Yeah.
Well, if they've had an issue, then that would also be something those would be already licensed individuals. It's just identified on the licensing side of the office.
Okay, and I don't remember if it stated how many of those there were in a particular year. They're not all necessarily tied to if it's criminal or not. Is that correct? Or are they all based on if they maybe had some criminal activity, either in state or out of state?
It could be criminal, but it
not
could also,
necessarily.
not necessarily, it could be an issue where another state board has taken an administrative action on them for something that would also be a violation in Alabama.
Okay, all right. And I think in 23 there was 442 of those. If that's right, if that chart is specifically for the ones with the L's, I'm really not sure for sure. Is that the case, Ms. Dixie? Are all those on that schedule of license internal review resolved? Are all of those strictly the ones with the L?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you much.
Yes, ma'am. We have two universities, Auburn and Samford, that educate our pharmacists that are listed in this report.
Yes, ma'am.
In between 2020 and 2023, we've had a 14% decrease at one university in the ability to pass the test, and yet in another we had a 21% decrease in the ability to pass the professional exam. That being the NAPLEX, if I'm pronouncing that correctly?
It's perfect.
Do you have any insights as to what has happened from 2020, where there was a much higher rate of passage, to 2023 as the test changed, or what has changed in our education institutions?
I can tell you that both schools since 2020, and I believe this is accurate because I've spoken to both deans, even though the one at Auburn is newer, but both of them changed their process in how they teach. And I don't know if there was somewhat of a change in the students getting used to that process and that affecting that. I will tell you, I've had long conversations with both deans because I have a daughter in pharmacy school, so I'm very concerned about her passage rate.
Right.
And I think there's potentially some issues coming out of 2020 that you had students that were being taught remotely and through COVID, and being taught how to practice pharmacy remotely. I don't have any figures on it, but just going through it myself, I think that it's probably not quite the same level that you're going to get if you were in a classroom or in a lab. But I do know both schools are very invested in these numbers and are working really hard. They're looking at adding additional law because, as you notice, the MPJE also dropped. So they're looking at how they teach the law, and they're also spending more time. One of the things that both schools have had issues with is the students they're not at the level of math skills that they think they should be. So that's part of what they're doing while they're on rotations, is really spending more time going through math skills, because it's a joke at my house that pharmacists count by 5, but we actually do a lot more in-depth math, and so it's very important that they get those skills. So I think it's probably a combination of a number of things, but I know both schools are working very hard on it. And I will say that both our schools in Alabama have some of the higher pass rates nationally. So this isn't something that is just in Alabama, it's a national issue.
Thank you. Any other members with questions? All right, thank you for your time. Thank you to the board for participation. I'd like to apologize to the dental examiners that we are behind schedule, but these are important proceedings and we have to do our due diligence. So now I'd like to have the dental examiners come forward. I would like for your spokesperson to introduce your board members. Have them recognized by where they are from and stand when their name is announced if able. she over there laughing about?
Good afternoon, Chairman Barfoot, Chairman Wilcox. I am Roberto Piszek of Robertsdale, Chair of the Board of Dental Examiners. A little bit about myself. I was born in Argentina, but was raised in Mobile. I graduated from Murphy High School, University of South Alabama, and University of Alabama School of Dentistry. I have practiced dentistry for 37 years. My wife and I have 4 children, 3 of whom are dentists. Susanna practices in Hughtown, and her husband, Mike, is a maxillofacial prosthodontist at the Kirkland Clinic. My son, Matthew, practices in Magnolia Springs, and my son, Andrew, practices with me in Robertsdale. My daughter charted a different course. She's an optometrist in Tuscaloosa. With me are the members of the board, Vice Chair Melody Jones of Montgomery, Secretary-Treasurer Marshall Williams of Birmingham, Kevin Sims of Hoover, Mark McElwain of Muscle Shoals, Dr. Holt Gray of Hoover, and our hygienist representative, Ms. Kay Alexander of Rainbow City. First of all, on behalf of the board, we want to thank you, the entire legislature, for passing HB 70 by Representative A.J. McCampbell, which created a new special charity volunteer license to help those who are providing free care at events throughout the state, primarily the underserved communities in rural Alabama. The board also wants to thank the examiners, Chief Examiner Rachel Riddle and General Counsel Jason Polk in particular. They helped the board and staff take a finding and turn into a positive solution. One of the findings in our report is that we were cited for having waived a fee for a mobile clinic facility permit for charitable organizations without statutory authority. After the notation from the examiners, we informed the group that we could not waive the fee this year, which would have jumped from $0 to approximately $15,000. It appeared the group of 300 children from Blount County that were scheduled to receive free care were not going to be able to do so this year. But the examiners dug back into the law and the rules and crafted a legal path to where we could change the fee to a nominal amount. The board took their advice last week at a monthly meeting, and the event is back on the next month. While no agency can ever truly say it loves the sunset process, we think this shows the positive side of what can be done. Like most boards, the rulemaking process can be difficult. Our board is not immune. The board spent the better part of the spring and summer working on a rule to put public safety guardrails on dentists injecting Botox. While the initial draft drew a lot of comments and questions, the board opted to modify it. At the final hearing for public comment last week, there were no comments against the proposed rule. It will be on the agenda for adoption in September. We acknowledge that we have a significant number of findings, none rooted in any malfeasance. Many have already been rectified, and the others are in the process of being rectified. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Blake Circle. I'm the executive director with the board. I'm here with our general counsel, Aaron Detling, and our prosecutor, Dr. Donna Dixon, who is also a dentist, and we will be available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we're going to move into our speakers, and then we'll go have some questions in a bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Lee Shimon, I'm sorry. Yes. You have 3 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable member of the Sunset Committee. It is a privilege and an honor to be able to speak to you this morning. The elected Alabama Board of Dental Examiners have sanctioned approximately 300 licensees since 2017. The first half of this year, they were able to sanction 51 dentists. It is unknown as to how many were sanctioned the 5 years prior. Alabama has approximately 2,200 dentists, which means that by 2029, I predict that 50% of us would have been sanctioned by this elected board. My investigation of a select number of other dental boards revealed that the Alabama Dental Board of Examiners is the most convicted of any of the sampled boards. You may be wondering as to why there aren't hundreds of people in this room protesting the conduct of this board. The answer is fear. Scared to death of this elected board. I know I am. I am very scared and nervous. And I'm also very worried that I'm standing here criticizing this board that has contracted with the most powerful lobbyist in Montgomery. Moreover, the common adage in Alabama is that the elected board will consider you guilty till they prove you guilty. The board giveth and the board taketh away. Just sign a consent order and walk away. Some dentists even believe that it is all about the money. That should not be the case in Alabama or in our nation, nor in our democracy. It is hard to believe these adages till you attend a disciplinary hearing, better known as a kangaroo court. I attended one on February 9th of this year. I witnessed the prosecuting attorney refuse to allow an expert witness to testify on behalf of the accused, and the hearing officer sustained. I witnessed the same prosecuting attorney rudely and disrespectfully prevent a board member from asking irrelevant and a meaningful question during the trial. And I witnessed other things that would really give you a stomach ache. Honorable elected Board of Dental Examiners, on February 9th of 2024, you convicted an innocent person and a respectful member of the dental community. I call on you today to resign right now and in front of these honorable representatives and senators. Honorable members of the Sunset Committee, whether this board resigns or not, I'm hopeful that you would appoint a new board with the help of the governor and the leaders of the Senate and the House. It's time to use a different board structure and a different model. Furthermore, it is very necessary and essential that we revamp and modify the Alabama Dental Practice Act to prevent this abusive use of legal process, no matter who is the board members or who is the prosecuting attorney.
Sir, your time is up. I will respectfully announce that Representative Treadaway had called on your behalf yesterday and asked for everybody to consider you his personal friend and to listen to your testimony. So I do want to pass that message on, but your time is up. Do any members have a question of the doctor? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mark King, and I apologize, it's not notated if you're a doctor or not. All right, that concludes our speakers. Now we will begin our questions of the Sunset Committee. Senator Gavan, you're recognized.
And this, I guess, maybe for Dixie, but on page 13, it says the board met 12 times to discuss legislative incentives. I've never heard of that, so I'm kind of curious what that means.
I think that question would be best answered by the board.
Good afternoon again. I'm Blake Strickland. That was a misspeak. It was initiative. Shouldn't have been incentive. It was wrong word. Inappropriate, wrong word, sorry.
Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I just have a couple of quick questions. One, as related to the presentation of financials, and one is regarding the fines and penalties. We know we have a 4-year stretch of those that we have to compare to from the prior audit before this sunset year. And fines and penalties, 108, 109, and then in 21-22 it jumped to 414, and that's just a large jump without asking questions about I'm, what all may be involved in penalties that were associated. I'm not calling it out for anything other than just an explanation about the jump.
Good afternoon again. A lot of that had to do with during the COVID time, we didn't have as many cases. Cases were being scheduled and they got pushed till after COVID, so they started coming up. Also in 22, we determined that we did not have a good mechanism in place for monitoring continuing education for our licensees, and we instituted a vendor called CE Broker and gave all the licensees 13 months to get registered for that and start uploading their CE so we could monitor that. Unfortunately, well over 200 people either did not register or upload their CE, which generated an audit from the board that generated a lot of non-disciplinary fines, which we have through board rule. It's capped at $500 for a non-disciplinary fine.
Okay, very good. One last thing, then this is a thing that we'll do in boards that have growing reserves, which is a good and a bad thing. For me, I need to know that the cash balances at the end of the year went from 1.7 to 3.7. So congrats on your conservative use of money, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the money stays cycling through either the profession or reduced fees for licenses. So over time, not today, but over time, just know that you would look into your reserves and what they may be going to, and just a plan for what you plan on doing with it. If it's to acquire something, invest in something, whatever it is, I just want to know that we're aware that we have cash that's accumulating and what we're going to do with them in the future.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Could you please tell me, how do you notify your members of additional CEUs? One dentist told me that he had some diversity, equity, and inclusion added this year or added in the last couple of years. And he was told he was notified only by email. And he was of concern that something of that nature that would jeopardize his license would be an email. He still can't find the email. So could you give me that procedure for how you notify?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, we don't have any DEI. We added an ethics continuing education 1 hour every year to their 20 hours. We notify them by email. We also post it on our website. And when I say notify by email, we probably send 4 emails out a month on specific things, updates on laws, continuing education. All of my staff, and I have 7 staff, we all have guide sheets, so when folks call in, we can tell them exactly what's needed. On our website, you can print out a cheat sheet on the exact CEs that you need to meet the requirements for that year.
Right. That same member also complimented you on the board on the new tracking system or software that can be utilized. Said there was no fee to use it unless you wanted a premium membership, but that it does allow for very good transparency on what you have out there, and it enables the board to be able to check what you have done better than it has in the past. So I wanted to make sure to give both observations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other members from the committee? Any other questions from the committee? Senator Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess more of a comment now. I mean, when I look at the significant findings in here, there's quite a few, and most of them go to internal controls, not really earth-shattering type things, but the lack of attention to detail and a lack of oversight. I'd just like to know what your explanation for that is.
My explanation is we need to do a better job. I've been in this role for just over 2 years. We started doing internal audits as soon as I came in, and I've been working with an outstanding board to get everything up and running. As I previously mentioned, we've only got 7 employees. We've had half of those employees turn over either through retirement or going to other jobs, and certain things were missed. But we worked diligently during the examiner's process and have addressed a vast majority of them already. Those that are not addressed are currently being addressed and will be shown to be back to par to what you expect from us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, there's not a procedure for recognize someone from the audience. but I'll be glad to meet you over here while someone else is asking a question. Meet you over to the side. Do I have any other members that have questions?
Yeah, there you go.
Pardon?
He'll occupy some time while you.
Go ahead, Senator Kelly.
All right. So since we've got a few moments to settle on this, I'm going to ask you to pontificate a bit on where you see the board heading with some of the issues that have been brought from us by a previous speaker, and then some of the concerns that we see in these significant findings. What are your plans for the future to rectify the things that haven't been, and your comments on what's been said this morning?
We have a very active board. They're all market participants. They're all active practicing licensees in our state. We make sure that our investigative and complaint protocols are spelled out to the letter. They're posted on our website. When we get a complaint in, it comes in through my office. That complaint goes to a review committee, which is made up of our prosecutor, a team leader, which is one of the board members, an investigator, myself if needed, and our compliance director. That investigation is worked and brought to the board, and a recommendation is made to the board, and the full board makes any decisions over whether a charge is levied or a notice is issued or anything. And until a notice is issued, no consent orders are discussed. As far as non-disciplinary fines, we go through all of those as a board. One by one, there's nothing that's done at the staff level. We make sure that everything is at the board level, and we make sure that as we're publishing our minutes, we're very, very specific about listing all those things out. And approximately 2 years ago, the board asked for a little bit more transparency in our disciplinary actions and asked us to start posting them on our website for the public to see what type charge. And then we also have a license lookup that's part of our database where you can go in and see if someone has a public record. And we're working diligently to make sure that we address those. As far as fees or fines and administrative costs, we are statutorily limited to $5,000 per count. The board does not stack charges. They are very reserved and conservative. They look at what would address the problem. We look at other things like continuing education and different programs that folks may attend to assist them going through. But it is something that's definitely done at the board level and with their full input and with their guidance from staff.
Yeah, I believe that I noticed too, and I may be incorrect here, where there was an open bid violation.
Also with the vehicles, unfortunately, what Mr. Braden did at the pharmacy board, we did as well. We pulled the bids off of Alabama Buys and used those not knowing that the master agreement was no longer valid. And we did not do the extra two-step check to get that. So we're an unusual board. We only have 2 vehicles. So it was kind of a pretty big hit to us to realize that we had gone outside that. But we have put a mechanism in place so that won't happen in the future.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Simpson.
If we're still filibustering, I'd like to hear more about this prosecutor, Dennis, because that intrigues me. But if we're not, I think I can move on.
We're not.
Okay, sorry.
All right. There was a human error. We have 2 speakers that were left off the speaker list. Sarah Withrow, you're recognized, and you have 3 minutes. And John Pacheco, and I'm sure I slayed that name, you're on deck. Our beloved clerk is out sick, so in the interest of making sure that we do hear from everybody that had signed up or contacted us in advance. So I apologize for the procedure, but we always want to make sure as a Sunset Committee to recognize anybody that had attempted to speak. Thank you, Ms. Withrow. You're recognized, and your 3 minutes has started now.
Thank you. I closed my office and drove 3 hours to be here today because the profession of dentistry is facing a crisis. As you may know, this board was created as the first such regulatory board for dentists in this nation. From the beginning, Alabama has been at the forefront of ensuring quality dental care, but things have taken a turn for the worse. This is why dentists across the state have formed a roundtable forum to call for reform of this board and its legislative and predatory actions. We have approached our own board with these concerns, but they have fallen on deaf ears. We have asked questions about the reasoning behind their initiatives and decisions, only to have those questions dismissed as rhetorical. We have asked for statistical evidence, but that evidence is hidden and altered. We have been publicly lied to, and the policies and procedures for how this board should conduct itself are treated as mere suggestions. They have denied proper meeting space for open public comment meetings, limiting those who wish to present and attend. They have denied professionals the ability to virtually appear for comment while allowing their own consultants to do so at their discretion. They have promised to open stream meetings but have not followed through. They have not taken their duty seriously, which is why many of us have gathered here today and others have written letters. Sadly, most are afraid to publicly petition or speak out for fear of retribution. First and foremost, I am absolutely in support of a dental board whose members are elected by professionals in the field. However, this board that has been called before you today has veered far outside its intended role. I say that with the exception of one member, Dr. Holt Gray, who has taken his oath and duties seriously. The purpose of this board is to ensure the safe practice of dental professionals, but it has become predatory, secretive, acting neither in the best interest of its constituents or the public. I'm asking for reform, transparency, answers, and checks and balances. The executive director, Blake Strickland, has too much control. He vets, researches, and drafts policies, complaints, and proposed statutes. He rejects expert research and testimony, refuses to allow professional organizations to speak, lies about that supporting research. He takes pride in the board's profitability due to the increase in disciplinary judgments. How can the board make informed decisions with miscommunication? I ask that he be removed and all actions spearheaded by him redacted and investigated. At this rate, where will we be in 10 years? Will there even be dental professionals left to govern in our state? I myself have considered leaving. I excelled in school, graduated top of my class, completed a respected residency 16 years ago, have never been disciplined until this year. I am a victim of unfair rulings and public shaming by this board. I was not counseled or placed in a peer review system. Instead, I was placed on death row with devastating long-term effects. I've had to fight to keep my credentials, recoup my reputation, argued to maintain my hospital privileges, and will still have to pay a $17,000 fee just to renew my license to practice my profession. Why is this board allowed to over-enforce and punish providers for minor or non-existent infractions? Settlements are pushed aggressively and fines feel like extortion. I do not blame the board members, but the system and the staff that mislead them. I ask that public shaming be reserved for true harm and negligence. I ask for a peer review system where first-time offenders can be remediated with respect. When dentists stop practicing due to fear of the board, lack of due process, unjust prosecutions, loss of credentials, the public will face access to care concerns.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Thank you for your time.
Do any members have a question of the speaker? All right, hearing none, thank you. John Pacheco, and please pronounce it for me.
It's John Pachuntic. Thanks for being here, and I apologize more to my dad for not wearing a suit. I've never been to one of these, and I feel totally underdressed, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all. As I said, my name is John Pachuntic. I graduated from UAB in 2004. Together with my brother, we started a dental practice from scratch, and we grew into a successful multi-doctor practice. 3 years ago, we partnered with a large national organization. Since then, I've taken the role of ensuring clinical quality across 105 offices in 5 states, while bridging the gap between clinical teams and business operations. My goal is to maintain an environment where doctors can focus on providing exceptional care to their patients. In this position, I see and hear a lot, but nowhere do I encounter more tension between a state board and the licensees than here in Alabama. I believe this tension fundamentally exists because the executive director serves as a gatekeeper between the elected board members and the licensees. While the intention might be to filter only necessary information to the board, when the person in that seat is more focused on asserting authority and being right than on protecting the public and seeking truth, he stands in stark contrast to the mission of the board. This is the reason why I'm here today. This is the reason there's been unprecedented attendance in our board meetings recently, and this is why the local news has even covered stories about this board recently. It is because of Blake Strickland. My own experiences with this man have been eye-opening. My first interaction was with him about sedation renewal when a glitch in the computer system caused confusion about the status of several permits. This process of trying to clarify did not go smoothly and ultimately led to my untimely renewal. I quickly realized that Blake was incapable of addressing the issues that the board had in causing this glitch. Instead, he was more interested in seeing how he could collect in punitive damages. So here I was, proactively working with the board to resolve this issue, and despite not seeing a single patient under sedation during this time, I was treated as a criminal by someone who couldn't even acknowledge that none of this would have happened had the board correctly updated my status when they had already cashed my check for this permit. To say the least, I was shocked and knew to be on guard for any future interactions with this person. While my initial encounter was less than satisfactory, I didn't have other stories to compare it to. But over the past 2 years, my perspective has shifted. I've witnessed blatant lies and the dismissal of licensees' concerns at town hall meetings. I've heard countless stories that mirror my own experiences, confirming a widespread distrust. What other state has an executive director who attends meetings and visits dental offices with a visible sidearm? Is that someone interested in protecting the public or in demonstrating their power? You tell me. What shocks me the most is when I talk to my partner dentists in other states. They actually go to their boards for guidance. Here in Alabama, ask our licensees if they seek guidance from the board. They do not. And if they do, when they are given vague answers and directed to just read the Dental Practice Act. Instead, our licensees are trained to stay under the radar, practice defensive dentistry instead of striving to elevate the profession.
Your time is up, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions of the speaker? All right, thank you so much. All right, members, we're back to your questions. Do I have anybody that would like to be recognized for questions? Senator Kelly.
Well, you certainly heard the previous comments, so I'd like to know your reaction.
Not everyone that has a case before the board has a result that they want. What I do know is that our board has a very robust process in place to ensure before anyone's ever noticed for a hearing that the information is there to sustain it. As far as my having an open and firearm, I'm 37 years law enforcement. I'm a state law enforcement officer, and I've never worn an exposed firearm in front of a meeting or anything. I've always worn a jacket. No, I'm not wearing one now, just in case y'all are wondering. But I do believe that due to some recent changes where, as you heard them talking about Botox, that became a very hot topic. It was something that my general counsel and I discussed at length because it was a board opinion. We didn't have anything in the board rules, so we didn't have anything putting it into the standard of care for a dentist. So we've been working with the board for almost a year to try to get that into the standard of care for dentists so they can continue to do that. And there was a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misperceptions, and nobody asking questions. I will say this, and I think my board will testify to this. I've never spoken in front of a group that I've not shared my cell phone number, and I hand out my business card to every complainant. They get my business card along with the letter. We are wide open and will answer any questions you have about any process we have. We have nothing to keep from our licensees or our complainants when we're dealing with them.
Pro Tem Pringle.
And I'm just going to tell you, that's not the story I'm being told from my friends that are dentists. They are saying the exact opposite. But I got a question. Did y'all change the rules on your advertising in the last couple of years, 5 or 6 years?
For advertising?
You don't have to say the quality of our work's no better than anybody else's. Did y'all take that off y'all's advertising?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
Does anybody in the dental board know that, answer that question? Yeah, you took the disclaimer out. Why did y'all take that off your advertising? Because one of your board members advertises, and he didn't want to put it on his former board members. I'm sorry. One of your former board members advertised. And I know for a fact that a dentist in Mobile complained about this board member was doing grotesquely unnecessary dental work on people. Grotesquely. And y'all refused to investigate it. Y'all circled your wagons around your board member and would not even look into the grotesque malfeasance of this man and what he was doing. So, I mean, y'all have got a reputation for kind of protecting your own and excluding everybody else. So I'm just going to tell you what my dental friends are telling me, and it is none of it is good about what y'all do and how you do it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your input.
Fellow committee members? All right, hearing no more, or not hearing any more questions or requests for questions, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Sunset meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.